touch that dial. You're now listening to Debate Talk Free Radio.
Brother B.A. Ben Abraham, and I'm your host of the Man Up segment on Debate Talk For You platform. The objective is for all brothers from different walks of life to come together, link up, and build on matters concerning all various stages of life. If anyone would like to reach out on concepts and ideas, you can reach Brother B.A. at radicalrhyme1984@gmail.com. Again, radicalrhyme1984@gmail.com. Tap in. Let's build. Shalom. Shalom.
Greetings. Welcome back once again. This is Imuna Yisrael, affectionately known as the First Lady for Debate Talk For You. We appreciate all the listeners, male and female, who support the Relationship Challenge and our newest edition and sister show, Under the Palm, Hebrew Women Speak. So sisters, if you have something to share or desire to be featured on the Debate Talk For You platform, please send all requests to underthepalm2@gmail.com. Once again, ladies, that's underthepalm2@gmail.com. We appreciate you and hope to hear from you soon.
Don't touch that dial. You're now listening to Debate Talk Free Radio.
Greetings, everyone. I think I was waiting to hear Sal. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 11th episode of Under the Palm, Hebrew Women Speak. I'm your host, Mayana Hasso-Ferret. Tonight's topic is the do's and don'ts for Pesach and Chag Hamatzot, better known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But before we go into that, I want to give a huge shout-out to Brother B.A. and the Anonymous Hebrew for the discussion that they held on Wednesday regarding the neglect, rejection, and distance shown to those sisters that are striving for righteousness in the community. If you missed that episode, make sure you go to www.youtube.com/Debate Talk For You and check out what real talk and what real brotherly love. The exact title looks like. The exact title of the show is Man Up, the Righteous Women Distanced and Forgotten. If you're listening to U.T.P on the replay, you will be able to click the description box, and our producer, Sal Showtime, another amazing brother, will add the link. Tonight, the Imahot and Akayot, Imas and Sisters, will discuss the biblical event of Passover and how it is described and prescribed in our records, then transition to the ways it has been represented, in some cases reimagined, in our contemporary communities. We will look at how our current condition limits any authentic reproduction of the feast as we kept it in Shemot or Exodus and in Bamidbar or the wilderness, also better known as Numbers, and and some of the extreme departures, such as the use of this holy convocation as a mate pairing opportunity, specifically by high-profile congregations such as IUIC and ISUPK. We encourage anyone from those congregations to call in and maybe give us some insight about what we have seen so far coming out of those spaces. Before I bring in the panel, it's important for those of you who may not be aware of why this event is important to Israelites or continues to be relevant to know a bit about the history. So I will briefly note key points for you. Like Brother Sal would say, get your pens and papers because this is going to be a super quick overview. Jacob, who is later known by the name Israel, had a son named Joseph, who was sold away into slavery by his own brothers. For more on this account, read Genesis 37, verses 12 through 36. In time, a famine causes these brothers to seek out Egypt for grain. It is here that they meet but do not recognize their brother Joseph, who has become a man of power and influence there. It is during this time that the brothers reconcile first only Joseph and Benjamin and later all 12. For details on how this happens, read chapters 42 through 45, up to 48. Verse 8, to read an account that includes the infamous cup of Joseph as a cup of divination and scrying tool, as well as describing the brothers as having almost mystical abilities, the least of which is a yell of Judah evoking enough dread to cause women in neighboring towns to prematurely go into labor. Read Jasher chapters 52 through 54. Following this event, the entire family of Israel reconciles by going into Egypt together, some 70 souls. Read Genesis 46, verse 27, Deuteronomy 10, verse 22, and Exodus 1, verse 5 for more. Finally, after some time, Israel increases in number, and the Egyptian dynasties change. These new dynasties are unaware of the positive and fearsome impression the Israelites once had and only perceive them as a problem. Read this in Exodus 1. This leads to the oppression of people, which included infanticide and slavery. It is from this oppression that we needed to be saved. The 10 plagues that you can read about in Exodus 7, 14 through 11, beginning of 7, 14 through 11 and 10, of the land of captivity that was meant for the oppressors, passed over Israel, giving us the name by which we memorialize this mercy. The instructions given during this time gives us a record of what our ancestors experienced and were mandated. For more on this account, please read Exodus chapters 11 and 12. On why we have the Passover and what it looked like. Again, you can find that in Exodus 11 and 12. We can, now that we've got some idea about why we're having this conversation and some of the key points, we will examine for our time together on the show three kind of subject questions. The first being, can we keep an authentic Passover considering our circumstances, or are we only capable of a memorial of this event? Why or why not? Second, if we cannot hold an authentic Passover, is it problematic to name it Passover if all of the necessary elements cannot be produced and presented? Again, you can find out about those things in chapters 11 and 12. Should we call our efforts something more accurate and be sincere in our convocational attempts? Let's explore why these convocations continue to produce a cycle of justification and contention. Finally, are some of these added pursuits, such as mate pairing and wife-seeking or husband-seeking, during this time of eating from the bread of affliction and reflection on our time of oppression and mercy, appropriate? Is the element of fear and reverence missing? And are we making a mockery of the Most High in doing some of this? Without further ado, I would like to have the panel give just their names and get right into the topic. Sister Only Love won't be able to stay with us long, so let's hear her thoughts first, then open the floor to everyone else. We beg of the Most High, the Holy One of creation, that he go before us and that this be an edifying conversation. Only Love, thank you for joining us, sis. Please greet the people.
Shalom, everyone, and good night. My name is Only Love Chica from Prophetic Whirlwind, Uncovering the Black Biblical Destiny. And I think this is a really important topic because this is one of the commanded feast days or holy convocations that we have before us, and many people are new to this observance. Many people don't know how within Christianity elements have been taken from this observance and placed over there. And any time one of the Moedim or appointed times come up, it's my personal belief that Yah wants to move in our personal lives in a mighty way and has a special attentive ear to us. And so I think it's really important for us to go into these times with seriousness. We can also go into the time of joy that Yah delivered us once, and I believe he'll deliver us again in an even greater exodus. So there's nothing wrong or sinful about joy, but even in joy, we need to make sure we're glorifying Yah and that we're not turning off people from these holy convocations through our behavior. So I don't want to take up too much time in the intro, but those are just some of my initial thoughts. And thank you for letting us talk about this important topic.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. We'll definitely get right back to you before you have to leave us. We'll move on to the panel and speak to SHAN-T. Give us your thoughts on our topic and your introduction.
Shalom to all. This is Sister SHAN-T. I'm looking forward definitely to talking about the do's and don'ts of Pesach, fasting, all of the things we're going to talk about in certain subjects. We keep it as a memorial, we keep it in how our ancestors did, and this type of activities a lot of so-called awakened Israelites over here in America are partaking in when they're doing in the memorial activities. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to hearing the comments and questions from the listening audience as well. Shalom.
Okay, so enough of that. Emuna. Sister Emuna, you there?
Yeah, Kane, sorry about that. I'm here. All praise be to the Most High, the Holy One of creation. This is Emuna Yisrael. I look forward to the topic as it relates to weighing in on, are we supposed to weigh in now, or are we supposed to wait? Shout out to everybody on the panel as well as the listening audience, Brother Sal, Sister Mayana. I don't know if I should just bust it out now, Sister Mayana. What you think?
If you want to give just kind of a real brief reflection on what you think about the topic, we're really going to explore it a little bit more on the second go-round. And only Love will lead that because she has to go.
All right. So the topic is one that, from the top of the gate, is one that always, every time it comes around each year without fail, comes with contention, comes with confusion, comes with, misunderstandings, comes with supplementation, and for many, it has turned many off. Many, it has turned many to look at this area. And so I hope some of that information comes out tonight and that we can proceed in this conversation in truth, even if it will make us feel uncomfortable. So I'll start off with that and I'll relinquish the mic.
There you go, bringing that fire early. That's right, we're going to get a little uncomfortable tonight. We'll turn to Mama Malaka since I don't think the emails are here yet. So, Mama Malaka, what are your thoughts? Give an intro to the people.
Oh, I'll praise it to the Most High and shalom to everyone on the panel and to those who are listening. This is Malaka, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to be discussing tonight because for those who are new in the faith, new in the walk, it can be very confusing. I know the first year that I was trying to celebrate the appointed days, I was very confused and very frustrated and disheartened. And so what I'm praying happens tonight for those who may be in that place, I'm hoping that you hear information that will be able to give you direction regarding what you're going to do in terms of doing your best to please the Most High. And I think that this is, in my opinion, this is our most special holy day. And so I think that it's important to strive to do your best to be pleasing to Yah in the remembrance of this day. And I know we're going to get more into the discussion of how we do that and what ways we can do that. But I just want to put that out there that if you're frustrated, disheartened, hope is here. We're going to talk about it, and I'm just praying that there will be direction at the end of this conversation. And you don't give up. It's okay to be a little bit confused as long as you continue to wait on clarity, seek clarity, and you don't quit. You don't give up. You don't put it on the shelf because you feel confused. That's not the solution. So with that, I'll yield.
Kane, there's absolutely a lot of confusion going on in a lot of areas, especially around the times when we're talking about these mandated, perpetually held high holy days. How do we keep them? When do we keep them? Why do we keep them? And that can be very overwhelming and confusing for new people waking up and trying to embrace the culture when everyone that's already here doesn't really seem to have it all together. Excellent point. We don't have the Imahot on yet, Ima's Yehudi and the Ami. So if you're out there, press 1. If you haven't called in, we'll wait. We're waiting for you. Those of you who are just joining us, you are listening into Under the Palm, Hebrew Women Speak. You have just been introduced to our amazing panel of sisters, and you're welcome to call in. The number here is 319-527-6239. If you press 1, you'll be put in the queue to join the conversation when we open the phone lines to the listening audience. So, sisters, as you know, we have a set of questions that we really want to delve into. We were coming out of Mitzrayim, and we were given this opportunity we were given this mercy by the Most High to bring us out of our captivity and land of affliction when we were in Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is usually, interestingly enough, usually translated as house of bondage or this other or some other things to that effect. This idea of bondage, but interrogation of the word lends itself to the meaning of this narrow space, this narrow way. And so we were in this kind of very narrow place, and we become free of that. The Most High brings us into this, what was supposed to be a temporary space, and we go into the wilderness, and then we are found back into the land that was promised to us after quite a bit of confusion and literally going around in circles until we were a generation that was willing and able and not just willing and able, but approved of by the Most High. And then we find ourselves, again, after a series of disobedience, disconnected from Him once again. So what are your thoughts on that? We're going to go to Sister Only Love because she won't be able to stay with us for the duration. So, Sister Only Love, you were given the questions. You've heard them again at the top of the show. What are your thoughts about the kinds of confusion that Israel is seeing, confusions about how the feast is kept? Can we keep them? Is it just a memorial? Are some of the things that some of the high-profile congregations doing during this holy time or this time of reflection appropriate? What are your thoughts about what you have seen and what new people might be looking at?
So as far as whether we can fully keep them in the land of our captivity, I know that is hotly debated. I do think we need to do the best that we can where we are. The first Passover, so to speak, was when we were in between our place of bondage and our homeland. I want to explore that more, but I would say for now we need to try to keep the commandments, but I'm interested in what others have to say. But for me and, my community, we will be keeping the Passover. I think that can be a whole separate debate, but I do think for those who are going to attempt to keep the Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread here, I think we need to just examine our hearts and why we're doing what we're doing. I know that there can be a lot of excitement around feast days. For some people, I live in New York with Sister Mayana. We have we have a lot of Hebrews here, but I know from friends and family that may be in the Midwest or other places where it's very isolating, this may be one of the few times of year you see other Hebrew people. And so I know there's a lot of excitement. There should be excitement, especially for our young people. We don't want them thinking, these feasts are a drag compared to other holidays. And these are not holidays. They're holy days. But, I think it's okay to have joy. I love to have get-togethers with friends, with family. I love all of that. But I think some of the items where you're getting flyers to come meet your warrior. I'm from New York, so Mayana, I don't know if I'm going too far ahead, but, if you're a Hebrew woman in New York, you're getting these invites and these flyers to come to some of these events that seem more like speed dating than the feast to the Most High. And so it's one thing, of course, we want to meet people who have our beliefs, but I think we really need to be mindful that we're not displeasing Yah in what we're doing. And Amos, there's a time when Israel gets so off the chain that Yah says in Amos, I think chapter 5, I'm disgusted by your festivals. I'm disgusted by your convocations because of how Israel was keeping it. And they had their tribe, they had the language, they had the right term for Yah, and they were still turning him off in how they were keeping the feast days, and they were right there in the land. I think that sisters need to be very careful with where they go to fellowship, especially if you're going to fly out of state and be by yourself. You need to practice wisdom. You need to preferably go with someone. And, I would not say for a sister to fly across the country to be a part of some type of Passover feast. I don't know what you call it, date auction, like we used to do in college when we were trying to raise money. I think that would not be smart for sisters to do. But I really think, you can clean all the physical leaven out of your house, but what is it to think about the leaven that's in our hearts? Because if you go and you sit and you go to these feasts, I saw a sister say, you can buy your new Passover outfit, but you're sitting down and you haven't forgiven someone. You haven't reconciled a relationship. You're going with, more intentions towards lust and towards praising Yah for delivering our people. And we need to still remember we need to be delivered again out of this captivity. So I would just encourage all the listeners, take this time to also examine the leaven in your own life, in your own heart. What sins do you need to get rid of and repent of? Who do you need to forgive? When you walk into that, that function, the Seder or the memorial service, wherever you're going, you're just going to another event if you're really not connected to Yah during that time. And so I hope that the thousands, maybe even now the millions of Hebrews that are going to be going to different events during this time, that they would have a real personal encounter with Yah so that we can leave the feast changed and not just be playing dress up. So those are just my initial thoughts.
Thank you for that. 3 great points among all of the very many points that I was listening to Only Love make, Sister Only Love make for us, is this idea of keeping or attempting to keep the Passover. So I guess my question would be, or my question has been, is attempting to keep the High Holy Day or these High Holy Days. 2 points are important. Only Love did make the distinction that the Passover is one event. It's a one-day event versus the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a second occurrence. And often it's discussed as if it's one day. One big event. Passover is not 8 days. Passover is 1 day. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is the remaining days. It's a completely different event. That was an important distinction. The other thing, that, in terms of trying to keep the Pesach, is it enough to say we're trying to keep it, knowing that we aren't doing any of the things or most of the things that are prescribed? If it's not keeping and it's just a memorial or it's just something else, should we call it what it is, or is it okay to say, well, it's Pesach is an attempt at Pesach, and are we ever called to attempt at Pesach? And if not, should we be doing that? That's an important question. I think that I would like to hear the sisters kind of parse through. The idea of joy and fellowship is one of those things that, as Israelites, we feel like we've lost from the secular world. So it was great to hear her bring out that it's okay to be happy. It's great to participate and share and participate in and share joy. And this idea of fellowship, this kind of seems to have eluded us in the community. But is that reason enough to call this Pesach? If it is about joy and if it is about fellowship, is that something else? And should we call it that? And finally, I'm thrilled. You thought that maybe you were going too far ahead, but no, I'm thrilled that you brought up that these different congregations, maybe even congregations we don't know about because they're not publishing it on YouTube and they're not sending out commercials about the red and the white carnations to to pretty much like color code the women's availability during Pesach, but still, is that something that's appropriate? Like, is this a mockery of the feast of the Most High? Nothing like this is being spoken about in the 11th and 12th chapter upon examination. So rather than being introspective, rather than being reflective, rather than being a humble and returning people, is it okay to have something that, as a sister likened to speed dating during this time? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Remember, this is a time where the men have their staff in their hand, their loins are girded, and their sandals are on their feet. At any moment, we have to leave. This is not the time to date. If we're thinking biblically, we're being biblically minded. So it's a very interesting question. And again, I invite anyone from these congregations, if there's someone from the IUIC in California, I'll be very specific because it was IUIC in California in 2017. I don't know and I won't assert that IUIC has this as their company policy. I'm not going to assert that or even accuse anyone of that. But if that is something that is standard in the congregation, please call in. Again, 319-527-6239. Press 1 and have a conversation with us, because honestly, we're a little uncomfortable with these behaviors, and we don't understand. Ashanti, do you agree with this kind of sentiment of I'm uncomfortable and I don't understand why these other things are being introduced to this high holy day? And what are your other thoughts about the questions that are on the table? This is your opportunity to weigh in. The mic is yours.
All right. If your beginning question was what are my thoughts on the mate pairing in some of the Israelite camps during Passover?
Yes, absolutely. Weigh in on that and anything else that you would like to weigh in on regarding our topic for today.
Okay. I'll backtrack. What Sister Amuna said is overwhelmingly true, and Sister Malaka said it too. Since I came to this walk, strong, getting on social media, 2013, I see a lot of infighting among Israelites about when the holy days, feast days, appointed times start. You know, which calendar should we use? Should we use the solar Enoch calendar, or should we use the quote unquote, they call it Jewish calendar? I'm like, it's not Jewish, it's just, you know, it's the lunar calendar, you know, and so to speak. Enoch talked about both calendars. Some people fail to realize that. Thing is, I don't understand why we're fighting. We're 2,000 years removed, and we're trying to recall a lot of our ancestral memorials, appointed times, feast days as best as we can with the information we have available to us now. I don't see why there's fighting. And I believe the Most High Yahweh, the Lord God of Israel, looks at our heart, our intent, and our motives and sees our efforts in wanting to keep this. At least we're not doing the other stuff, you know, that we came out of doing. So I think the Most High applauds the effort, and I don't think that people are having enough patience, enough simmer down to realize that and comprehend that. You know, we're busy trying to get it absolutely correct. I don't think any of us have it absolutely correct. We're just doing the best we can with the information we have now. To answer the question about the mate pairing on the Passover day and Feast of Unleavened Bread during that week, I don't believe that may be appropriate at that time. Maybe another time. And I think sometimes when we come out of celebrating the holidays and into celebrating the holy days, that we want to bring some sort of element that we were indulging in when we were celebrating Christmas, Easter, you know, Thanksgiving, and Halloween. We want to bring in games and festivities, and we don't really interrogate or thoroughly examine the games and events and things of that nature to include, I play dominoes, I play spades, I play pool. Am I going to incorporate any of that into Feast of Unleavened Bread? I don't know. I usually don't. But the mate pairing, it's it's just going on. The motive, okay, you need some protection. Our sisters need some protection. I understand that sisters need protection. The thing about the protection thing is males think they're the only protection. I'm like, do you guys understand that there or to help me is another sense of protection? If you ask a guy right now, I don't need no one to protect me. What you going to protect me from? A lot. We protect you from a lot. We are that spiritual protection, if you will. There's more protection than physical than people need. So I'm like, okay, what we need protection from? It's like we're not understanding the passage where it says woman was made for man. And now we have in this nurturing where it seems like man, is God's gift, to the woman. So do I think that's appropriate during that time? Probably not. Maybe another time. But why use the Feast of Unleavened Bread for any other content than what's laid out? We have enough to do. The Father gave us enough to do. There is the freedom there, but we have to be using discretion and discernment with the freedoms we have during these appointed times. Now, celebrating the Pesach, should we call it that? Well, that's what it's called. And we understand that the Most High Yahweh, He knew He was going to have to punish us, and in a way He punished us and scattered us. So we knew we was going to end up in the year 2018 over in America, over in Cuba, over in South America, all over the globe, right? So let me read something from Deuteronomy 4 real quick, and I'm going to yield after that. Deuteronomy 4. The Most High says, pretty much if you be disobedient, He's pretty much going to have to do some things. So verse 27 says, and Yahweh shall scatter you among the peoples, and you shall be left few in number among the nations where Yahweh drives you. That's because we're being disobedient to the law, statutes, and commandments, right? It says verse 28, and there you shall serve mighty one, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. Verse 29, but from there you shall seek Yahweh your Elohim, and shall find, when you search for Him with all your heart and with all your being, in your distress. And all these words shall come upon you in the latter days. Then you shall return to Yahweh your Elohim and shall obey His voice. For Yahweh your Elohim is a compassionate El. He does not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers which He swore to them. And I think people don't understand that the state is not only a physical land where you are, but it's a mind frame. Your state. Like people go, okay, what state are you in? What's your mind frame looking like? What's your mindset? What's your emotional stance? You see what I mean? So when you get to a certain place of understanding in your mind, in your heart, in your soul, in your spirit, you get into that place, and that place takes you to an understanding. Okay, I understand what you're saying, Most High Yahweh. You've given me a set of lenses to see things clearly now. I want to serve you in the best way possible with the information I have now. Let me try to get to your feast. Let me try to understand your appointed feast and times. Let me try to get them done now, right? So no matter what land the Father scattered us to, He said when these things are recalled in your mind and your heart to do them, then you go ahead and do them. I'm going to have compassion on you, and I'm going to accept that. We deal with a merciful Father. So that's what I have for now. My I yield.
Torah for that. I'm going to move on to Sister Amuna. So, Amuna, so what we've heard so far is, what are your reflections on that? Are we going to get an A for effort on this Pesach celebrations? We're doing our best. We're in this space. We are working with what we have. Are we making a mockery of the day, or are we just doing what we can to keep the culture alive, to remember it? Is this something that we can call keeping, or is this memorializing, or is this something else? I would like your thoughts on that, especially since points are being brought out. We did begin this keeping of the Passover in captivity. Isn't that reason enough to believe that captivity isn't the breaking point? That's not the thing that's limiting us. Did we celebrate this during the wilderness, or did we have to wait until afterwards and have Joshua come in and do something else? Also, what are your thoughts on this kind of speed dating, as Sister Only Love brought out? The mic is yours.
Wow, that was a lot. I'm not sure. But I would say that just over the years and just through study and much prayer, the thought, it makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside that, we're going to get an A for effort. But just through observations, much prayer, study, I'm going to have to say no on that one. I'm going to, and I know that everybody, I can't believe Amuna said that. The feast, I think we're looking at it outside of the context of what it is, what it represents, And maybe if we look at other analogies, maybe we can understand what it is. Having somebody's phone is echoing. I'm not sure there's an echo on the line. But the thought of the individualistic feast, that's not Torah. Torah left on record clearly that the feast is converging on one location that the Most High has destined for us. He says the place that he has put his name. There's only one place. And so no matter how much we flip it and turn it and try to make it sound nice and, put all kind of stuff on it, it is what it is. We are scattered to the places that we are scattered to for disobedience. And so we have many situations within the Torah that, one in particular, when the feast was coming up, and they had not kept it for a long time. I believe it's in the time of Hezekiah, and they sent out messages throughout to come to Jerusalem to keep the feast. And some of the other tribes scoffed, and the priests weren't ready. They had to put off the Pesach for the second year because that's Torah, right? We also see in the book of Tobit, for those who read the Apocrypha, we see in the book of Tobit where Tobit is speaking about how he's of the tribe of Naphtali, but his peoples weren't coming to Jerusalem to keep the feast, but he was coming, and he's talking about it in the first chapter of Tobit as his righteousness. And so in Tobit, we see what they call the Pentecost, which we know is Shavuot, or first feast of week, of first fruits. And we see him not in the land, but he's having a remembrance. There's a difference. Sister Mayana asked the question of, there's a difference between I'm remembering that this is the time that we're supposed to be doing it, and, oh, yeah, I did it. That's two different things, you know what I'm saying? And so it's not to take away the remembrance of what we're supposed to be doing, but to also believe that there's 50 feasts, right, all over the diaspora. There's like 10 Pesachs, and whenever I did it, then that's sufficient. That means that's our feast. Because the feast that the Most High prescribed is one. It's the energy of all of Yisrael coming to worship the true and living power. And I know that's controversial. And what I think is happening concerning one of Sister Mayana's question, I think it's a hybrid. What's happening is that we're coming from a place that has holidays. And they're used to, we as a people are used to dressing up. We like, and I said to Mayana earlier, we were made for praise, renown, and splendor. So we're used to dressing up. We love eating and partying and socializing. And Sister Only Love said it, for the children, they don't, what are they going to have? A lot of our people say, they can't have Christmas, what are they going to have? They can't have Thanksgiving, what are they going to have? So we are kind of holding on. We've merged the thought of the holy days. And a lot of us are trying to appease our consciousness and ourself and our desire to still interface under the guise of these feasts, or what we're calling the feast. I was saying, I believe it was Sister Malaka who just said, if it's not for some of these, people wouldn't see each other. And so the same way we oftentimes are misusing the Shabbat for our own purposes, is the same way, in my estimation, over the years, and it's been, it's not 1 or 2 years, let me just say, but we're using it for our own purposes, and we see that clearly to the question of what now can we do on them. Now we get to make up what we can do, what it's going to, where we can have it. I want to be in San Antonio, and you want to be in Florida, and you want to be in New York, and we're saying we're doing it, And so I'll relinquish the mic at that. I don't know if I answered all the questions. I know people are probably twitching and turning in your seats at this point. And one more thing, I would say, if we don't come to the point of true humility, then we will not come to the point of true celebration. We have to truly acknowledge what we are able to do and what we are not able to do, and then meet the Creator where we are ready to hear the directions and instructions. Because false start is still a false start. No matter how much we anticipate, we're trying to return, but the key things we're not doing. The key things, the very simple things, when the Most High even said in the book of Isaiah, and he's saying, okay, give me a minute with all of that, because what about this? What about the poor? What about the orphan? And people are saying, it says in all your dwelling places. It also says in a certain place. And I think that reading comprehension comes into the equation where we try to play Scrabble and word game with what the text is actually saying. And so with that, if anybody have any questions, if this is Imuna who's saying this, so feel free to call in respectfully, and I will converse with you because I already know I stepped on some toes. I relinquish the mic.
Yeah. A little more fire here on Under the Palm. We're coming across the 9 o'clock hour. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Under the Palm, Hebrew Women Speak. The number to dial in to maybe have a conversation about some of the things that you just heard from Amuna Yisrael. Amuna, I don't want you to go far because I didn't hear your thoughts about some of this flavor, season of love, Flavor Flav style, or the seasons of the Bachelor and the Bachelorette happening at these so-called Pesach events. But before I get back to you, and we actually do get to hear from Malaka. You didn't hear from Malaka yet. We're going to go back to Only Love and see if Only Love wants to have any closing thoughts or respond to some of the things that she's heard you say and the like before she leaves us. Sister Only Love, do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to say in response to some of the things that you have heard so far?
Shalom, sis. Since Sister Malaka hasn't gone, I'll let her take this round, and then I'll go after her, even if it's like 5 minutes after 9. I just want to make sure she gets in the round.
Behind the scenes, I already cleared it with the sister. You know how we do here Under the Palm. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I would just say with some of what is, I'm just going to reiterate like what I said before. If you are observing it, I really hope that you're taking the time to make sure that you're encountering Yah, to make sure that you're not going off to some grand celebration, but there's people you need to work things out with. I think that I wish there was more time, and maybe for like a separate show during another feast, we can go into whether it's a memorial or it's the actual feast, because I think that can be a rich discussion, but I know my time is limited, and so I'm really concerned, though, that the way these feast days are being kept is, in some places, not in all places, just going off into having a party. And I know some places where they're coming out of the church and into Torah, they're just having a church service, and they're erring too much to the other side. But I'm also really concerned with some of the advertisements for the purpose of the women being there. And I think that goes back to other conversations that have been had on Under the Palm and the Relationship Challenge. It's like there's this belief that women don't have a personal relationship with Yah. And so instead of us being able to come to a feast day, to a convocation, to actually have an encounter with Yah, to actually learn something about, our heritage and our people, it's like, come wear this corsage so we can marry you off. It's always boiled down to our identity as, being desired by a brother versus actually having a personal relationship with Yah. And that concerns me. You know, sisters can come, you know, and be paired up, but could a sister come and maybe speak at the Seder? That would be, you know, controversial for many people. And I guess just a little cultural update, because I know some Hebrew congregations in Nigeria and Ghana are about to observe Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. This September, I went to the Homowo Festival of the God people, and some who listen to Rabbi Akwete on the Relationship Challenge may know that's his ethnic group. And the Homowo Festival is similar to Passover, but what the God people have kept to not only commemorate when we were let out of Egypt, but to commemorate Yah keeping them from Israel all the way back, all the way to Ghana. And I went there, and it was interesting to see, of course, there were prayers. They had their Levites there. It was celebration. It was food, but it was also outdoors, and it was more communal as opposed to being like a church service. And that just gave me some thoughts about how do we keep the feast? You know, how close are we to our culture here versus maybe some places in the East who may still be struggling with retaining their culture, but it looked more interactive. It looked more like an actual feast than some observances that I've been to. And so people can look up the Homowo Festival on YouTube. Rabbi Akwete Ama has a video about the Homowo Festival and its connection to Passover. And on Prophetic World, when I also posted some videos and some pictures of it. It's just an interesting thought about how Israel scattered abroad keeps these days differently, for better or for worse. So with that, I'll say shalom and good night. Thank you.
This is Malaka. Is Mayana back on the line yet? Is she here yet?
Yeah, Mayana's back.
I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm here, but go ahead.
Okay. What I was going to say, really kind of brief, but I personally, in my study and in my prayer time, I have come to believe that we're not able to keep the feast in the way that it is prescribed in Scripture. We know that there's a specific sacrifice that's supposed to be offered in the place where the Most High has placed His name. So we know that. So what I do is I believe that He did command us to the retelling of this story to the generations. He commanded us to observe it to the generations. But if we're not able to do it, then we're in disobedience because we can't do it. And we're in disobedience because we were in disobedience, and now we're in captivity being in disobedience. So the only one that can redeem us out of that cycle is Him. So in the meanwhile, to doing the part that I can do, which is the retelling of the story to the generations, I have to pass down the understanding of what Yah did to my children so that they can pass it down to their children. So when I say I observe Pesach, what I am actually doing is I am observing the retelling of the story of Passover and how Passover came into being and how we lost our ability to offer the sacrifices and the things that we were prescribed to do by the Most High. I don't think that we have, I don't think we can stop doing a retelling. And because children are visual and interactive, we do things that are visual and interactive in the retelling of it. We have a family meal. We sit down together. We talk about it. We do some things with them where they're helping me to tell the story. This is not what the Scripture says I'm supposed to do to celebrate Passover or to observe Passover, but it is in keeping with what He says I'm to do in terms of retelling the story of Passover. And so, for those who are new in the faith, I think it's important to not to just say, okay, you're going to be in confusion, so now you just accept that you're in confusion. I think that it's important to suggest that you study and you pray and you see what the scripture says about whether or not we can actually do the actual observance. And if you find, as I found, that you can't do the actual observance, then you commit to the retelling of the history of our people, the history of our Elohim, and what he has done and what he has promised to do. So I wanted to start with that. And then the next thing that I wanted to say is I wanted to address the whole, some of the things that people are doing in calling it a Pesach celebration or observance. I saw some video of an auction of women that was happening, and this was at IUIC in California, and the women were being auctioned at a price, dollars, American dollars, who were being offered for these women, and these women were presenting themselves in ways that were using words and a physical presence that was trying to appeal to the men who were standing out in the audience and observing them and bidding, I suppose. I didn't actually see the bidding, but I saw the auctioneer basically preparing the auction. And what I wanted to say is that it really, to me, was so far from the intent of the observance of Pesach. Behind every law that the Most High has given us, or every observance, every appointed day, every statute, every commandment, there is an intent. That when we get so far off into what we want to do that we're not even acknowledging the intent, I think we're in really serious trouble. It's one thing to be disobedient, and then it's a whole other thing to add willful disobedience, to add willfulness to the disobedience. It's like you can be disobedient because, you're supposed to pour this is just a random example, but if I tell my child to bring me something to drink and to bring it to me in a glass, and they bring it to me in a cup because they couldn't find the glass, were they disobedient? Yes, in as much as they didn't do it the way I prescribed. They didn't do it the way I told them to do it. But did they have an intent to honor what I said to them? Yes. As a parent, I am going to look at the intent. And I believe the Most High is a better parent than me. Does that mean we should just go off doing whatever we want to do, however we want to do it? No. But I think it's very important for us to try and discern the intent behind what the Most High is saying before we make decisions on how we're going to proceed with an observation or a memorial or a retelling. And with that, I yield.
Excellent points about intent were brought out in this conversation. Malak, I'm curious thoughts about ISUPK and other congregations have videoed their attempts to slaughter the whole lamb and do that part of it. Many of us know or are limited to having to get their lamb at the local supermarket or maybe even a butcher, but there are some congregations that are getting this lamb straight out of off the pastures. And are they doing it right? Would you say that if you're doing that part, are they fulfilling it? Are they able to keep it? I liked what you're saying about the idea of the memorial versus this idea of saying I have fully kept it. I think that's what we were hearing from Imuna. This idea, if you get together and you have some of the features of the Pesach, but this is not the Pesach just because you have some of the markers. If you acknowledge that what you're doing is a memorial or a remembering or a gathering during the season of Pesach and not trying to lay claim to fully observing or fully executing Pesach, there is a difference. The intention being there, I want to just to clarify, the intention being there that there was the trying to do it to the best of the ability, but then is the intention do we take that and then go left with the intention when we say, well, we gave it our best effort, and so we're going to present this as obedience, when in fact it's not fully obedience? Do we go left with good intention when we claim to have done something we really haven't done? That was my question towards intention. And then my question about, what are your thoughts about congregations that have taken a live animal and executed it in some of them in fashions that would be arguably not exactly the way animals are executed? But is that, would those people be able to claim, in your estimation, obedience?
Did you have an order you wanted us to answer that in, or was that directed to me? Or?
I would like to start with you, since we ended with you, and then we'll go back down to Malaka, to Amuna, and then Sister Ashanti, because we no longer have Only Love on the line with us. But we do want to thank you, Only Love, for coming through and spending some time with us, even though you did have a prior commitment. We appreciate your time and energy and contribution. So, Malaka, yes, your thoughts first.
Okay. I would have to say, yes, I've seen the video too of people slaughtering the lamb, and the thing that I know that the scripture says is that the sacrifice has to be made in the place where the Most High has placed His name, and I don't really think like He placed His name here in Bell Vernon, Pennsylvania, where I'm at. So I can't slaughter a lamb in my backyard and say, okay, this is the offering that the Most High has prescribed. I can't do that. We don't have the Kohanim are not in, they're not in their place doing what they do. So we don't have the utensils. That's kind of why I use the example of a glass. If I ask for my drink to be given to me in a glass, and my child brings it to me in because I don't drink out of plastic cups, so I'm not going to take that. That she tried it, but I'm not. It's not going to be what I receive. So what I would rather her do is say to me, I don't have a glass, Mom. We don't have a glass. What can I do? What? I'm gonna wait until you tell me what to do, or until you put me in a position to have the glass so I can bring this to you. So, I know that's kind of a silly example, but my point is, I don't think you can now say, okay, well, I added this feature of what you prescribed, and it's still not the whole thing, but it's 3/4. I don't think that Yah is a 3/4 kind of Elohim. I think either you can do it, or you can't do it in the way that He prescribed. And so, no, I don't think being able to slaughter the lamb and not being able to offer it in the place that the offering is supposed to be offered in is going to be good enough. So that's why I have relegated myself to the retelling of the story, because I can't offer the offering. I don't know any priest to offer the offering. There's no temple to offer an offering. There's I can't do it. So what I can do is tell my children why we can't do it, and the story of how it originated, and that's where I would have to stay with that. And the second part of what you said, I'm sorry, sis, I forgot what the second part of the question was.
I think you answered both. We talked about intent, and we talked about whether I was asking about intent, and then intent would equal obedience. And I asked you about, does the slaughtering of the lamb is that a good thing? Like, would you consider that effort a better attempt at obedience? Like, could that rise to obedience, since it's not from the butcher or from the local Whole Foods? The like, but thank you so much for that. I wanted to go and have Amuna weigh in from that, but I just received notice that Ima Naomi is in the building, and I don't know if Ima, have you heard some of the things that have already been discussed so far?
I actually, I'm driving, and I just tuned in, and I heard some of the last parts of it. And may I comment at this point, or do you want me to wait until somebody else has commented?
No, I want to bring you in. I was just trying to place how much you've heard so far. So I'll give you something very brief. We're looking at right now whether or not we can fully keep the Passover versus memorializing the event? If we have certain dinners and we congregate together, can we fully call that obedience to Pesach, or should we be more honest and sincere and say, we're memorializing this biblical event, and we do have limitations and restrictions, and so it's not quite Pesach, but it is our remembering of the biblical ordinance.
I would agree with the latter because it to do nothing to me is just ludicrous. If we're trying to get back to the laws that of the Most High, but we have to understand that all we're doing is memorializing it. Because first of all, we don't have the Levites, we don't have the Levitical order, we don't have any of that. And the law specifically tells us in Deuteronomy that you have to sacrifice the Passover lamb in the place where Yah causes his name to be. So we're not going to be able to do that. We're not there yet. If we remember that even in the time of Chronicles, I think it was, or maybe even Ezra, because I'm not a chapter and verse person. I remember that we didn't have enough Levites consecrated to offer up. So what we had to do was consecrate the Levites first before we could even make the offerings that we were making and do the feast that we wanted to do. And we had all the good intentions in our heart, but we had to consecrate those Levites because they had been consecrated. My thing is this: certainly, what we're doing is memorializing it, and basically, that's what the law requires us to do. It requires us to remember we're celebrating this particular season because we were forced to leave Egypt without having our bread leavened, and the Most High took us out with a high hand out of Egypt. So I would say certainly commemorate the day and have your feast in the manner that you would have it up to unleavened bread 7 days, to let y'all know that you're at least striving to keep some semblance of the law. But if we're talking about sacrificing, that is definitely, we're not going to be able to do that, not here. Very good.
So for that, absolutely. I mean, you also repeated one of the things that Emuna brought out about the Levites, not being consecrated, having to actually delay properly celebrating the Passover. It is in 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter. For the listening audience who have heard this reference twice now by both Naomi and Emuna, this is happening during the reign of Hezekiah. You'll find that discussed in 2 Chronicles, the 30th verse. Speaking of Emuna, we'll move right back towards the queue and pick up with Emuna. So Emuna, we're hearing some agreement that it's not obedience to put in the effort. Instead, we do have an obligation to call it what it is, to be sincere in our efforts and not call it the obedience or the keeping of Passover, but rather that it is a memorial. It is an attempt. We're keeping alive the story. We're keeping alive the obligation. But we do have to be honest about the fact that we don't have everything in place. So what else would you add to that? How do you feel about how the conversation is turning more to this idea of it's not the actual Pesach? These events are an attempt, a memorial.
I think as it relates to those who have chimed in on the line, Ima, the sisters that's on the line. However, the men, a lot of the leaders who are in charge of or who have placed themselves in spaces of these congregations have declared that this is Pesach. You see what I'm saying? So I would love to hear from the listening audience as well, because we've come to that, but many will say like, y'all don't count. Well, though we know we do, but you have a large majority of the leaders telling the people this is Pesach, and the issue comes in where there's a lack of humility to say we don't know. We don't know when it is. We don't know what the right calendar is, and this is the reason why we have confusion. And so until we come to that place of humility, which is what the Torah prescribes when you're scattered into the lands of your captivity, it prescribes humility. Humility. when you bethink yourself. That's lacking. So, yes, it's good that we say, you know what, I'm not going to murk the lamb, which, a sister sent me somebody 2018 with the knife at the lamb's throat. I know the person. And I'm like, tell them to stop. What are you doing in 2018? You understand what I'm saying? And so this thought is floating out there like, yes, I'll be super Israelite if I do this. And there's a lack of humility across the board, and it has become, if you're with this camp, you will see a string of Pesach, Hamatzot pictures going down your timeline from now to all the way April. Wow, you can count how many. What in the world are we doing? You see, and what I'm saying is that this thought of humility and repentance to say, I do not know. So that because it's not our feast. It's the feast of the Most High that represents the blessings that the Creator has given us. So if we're in the same position that we were in Egypt talking about let my people go, let's go ahead and go back over the conversation that Moshe was having with Pharaoh. He was like, go in the wilderness, some days off and go do your Pesach. Moshe came back was like, nah, you got to let us go. So how are we having that very same conversation? I don't know if I could come to the first and the last day of the feast because, the man is acting up. You having the same conversation Moshe was having with Pharaoh. Tell the truth. And isn't that like the Most High was like, it's okay, tell them to do it in Goshen. It was like when they do it in Goshen, y'all ain't coming back. Pack your bags. So if we want to really put it into perspective to say, listen, Most High, we beseech you, and we have to stop playing games. We have to stop doing something that we're not so that we can really get in the position for us to do it. If we want to bring first fruits, we have to get in the position that we can have first fruits to bring. You understand what I'm saying? And so, the Most High, our true and living power, is able to do it before and He's able to do it again, but we have to be honest, and the Creator's waiting for us to show up to the conversation. Not with the excuses, to show up to the conversation vulnerable, broken, ready to be healed, ready to be delivered, ready to be truthful. So that's what I would say in regard to that we still have another step to go because, unfortunately, we're still looking for at least I tried. You know what I'm saying? At least I tried. And we look around, but I relinquish the mic.
Emma, we were talking about some of the add-ons that have been seen at these events that have been called Pesach. The pairing of the men and the women, the warriors and the single women. I know that I gave you some of the materials, some references to congregations that have done this over the years and are apparently intending to continue this new thing in the land. So I want you to think about that when we go. We're going to go back to SHAN-T, and then I'll come back to you and get your thoughts on some of that. So, SHAN-T, what are your thoughts on what you've heard so far? This idea of it's not quite obedience, it's not quite the keeping of the Passover, but instead there's a memorializing. There is the obligation to retell, because we do have the ability to retell even if we do not have the ability to reproduce the holiday, the holy day. So what are your thoughts? The mic is yours.
I want to say a couple of things before I bring out some passages in Scripture. I like to think of going deeper into what a name is. In the Hebrew, name is Shem, and it means reputation, character, or authority, not necessarily just a literal pronunciation. I know in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, I believe, the Father, Yahweh, said, I choose to place my name in Jerusalem. You look at the word Jerusalem. It's Yara, I think, in Shalom or Shalom together. So when you look at the meaning of Jerusalem, it's not necessarily just a piece of land, dirt, property. It's also character, reputation, and authority. So when the Most High says, I choose to put my name in Jerusalem, we could say the Father Yahweh is saying, I choose to put my character, reputation, or authority founded peace. That's what Jerusalem means, founded peace. So understand also that the Father Yahweh always called Jerusalem a her. It wasn't just the land, it was the people or Israel who made up that land, that founded peace. And it was always called her. So I believe that since the Father Yahweh knew in 2018 that we were going to be in the place that Yahweh scattered us, and he said, we'll do this thing here, he knew we were going to be placed in our areas right now, coming to the remembrance of following the law, statutes, and commandments. So I believe that us doing what we're doing is memorializing it, of course. We are being obedient. We are following it. The Most High always puts intricacies and details and particulars in how he wants something done. When there's no absolute or explicit, then there's that freedom as long as it doesn't violate, the foundational things of what the Father says not to do. You always have to have some discernment and discretion on what to add. You can't be adding no crazy stuff. Let me read something real quick from Numbers 8. Numbers 9. Numbers 9, starting at verse 1. I'm reading from the Scriptures ISR version. Sometimes it sounds a little off, but and Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the first new moon or month of the second year, after they had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, saying, now let the children of Israel perform the Pesach at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this new moon or month, between the evenings, perform it at its appointed time. According to all its laws and right rulings, you perform it. This is the second year Israelites came out of Egypt, and they were in the wilderness of Sin. Mm-hmm. So when the Father says perform it, maybe we can take the lamb and eat it, roast it in the fire, but maybe we just can't put the blood on the doorpost so the Most High can pass this over. But if this is being done in the wilderness of Sinai and the Father saying perform it, that means perform it. Now, over in Joshua 5, I'm going to read that, but over in Gilgal, again, the children of Israel, right, the men circumcise themselves after they cross over the Jordan, and they perform the Pesach, right? And we didn't retelling. But the thing is, to bring something to your memory and have it placed there as if it was second nature, you have to do it. You have to practice it. You have to indulge in it. You have to involve yourself in it. You have to participate in it. And the more you participate and do these things as practice and rehearsal, the more they are on your mind. They are impressed on your mind to remember, to recall, to have these in your thoughts so that you can keep passing them down to the next generation so they can understand what your people have gone through and who you are and how to proceed in your walk, right? I, for one, I don't have any qualms with people going to the butcher and getting a lamb. Anytime somebody's eating meat or flesh of an animal, guess what? Somebody had to slaughter it. Somebody had to skin it. Somebody had to take the blood from it. Somebody had to cut it up. So, going to get some meat, particularly lamb, I don't think that's an issue. I eat lamb more than one time a year. I actually do. But when somebody says, okay, well, I'm doing this exactly like, the people did in the Bible, does it say verbatim how they did it? Everything is not black and white verbatim in the Bible. You see what I'm saying? So if we said we're doing it exactly how the children of Israel did it, no, they didn't have YouTube to record, their Pesach Passover services. You know what I mean? They didn't have a boombox or a cassette tape or 8-track just to hit record. You know, they didn't have a camcorder to record. So can we know exactly how they did it to replicate it to the T? Maybe not. But when we're saying we're doing these things, okay, if we're taking something, the lamb slanted between the evenings, if we're removing the blood, if we're removing the inward trails, if we're skinning it and then cooking it up in the fire and eating, I don't see no issue with that. That's how you got to eat meat to begin with. So if they want to do it, cool. I'm just not, personally, this is what I'll say lastly. I'm not bothered by people's attempts at keeping these 5 feet. You know, I just see an attempt here. And like I said, the Father knew we were going to be all over the four corners of the world. And remember, we are the temple now. That body is the temple now, right? Yeah, we don't have a physical building standing temple like the one that got, taken down in 70 A.D., but our body is. And the Most High, his name, his character, his reputation and authority is in our spirit. It's in us, right? And we're the priests of our temple now. So as long as we're trying to connect to the Most High Yahweh the best we know how, with his instructions the best we know how, with what he's particularly or precisely put in the scripture, then do that. And I don't see a problem with it. I don't think that's disobedience at all. Hey, let's go get a lamb. I don't see no issue with it. I think that is being obedient. Yeah, you can't put the blood on the door, but, where the Most High Yahweh's name in Jerusalem is founded peace. Do you within your spirit, do you within your body, do you within your heart and your mind have founded peace? Because if you have founded peace, you are Jerusalem. And the Father will place his character, authority, and reputation in your founded peace. And with that, I yield.
Okay, I'm going to do a mic check. Before we continue, let's just take a call while I do this mic check. So I'll open up the phone lines, and I will see if I can help with this echo.
All right, we're going to the phone lines. Once again, the number is 319-527-6239. Let's go to 720-404. You're live in air.
Shalom. Can you all hear me?
You're loud and clear.
Shalom. My name is Drea. I'm calling from Denver, Colorado. I just wanted to say that this conversation is very edifying. I also agree with the sister, every sister that has spoken on some level. I believe that, for one, there's a big issue when it comes to this holy day in particular, and with camps being on the spotlight, because their camps have the most impression, I would say, on our people, especially those who are new into the walk, because they have a great following. And that's where most people are. That's where most people are, quote unquote, awakened. So I do think that there's issues when it comes to certain things being implemented during this time of year, especially auctions. And when you, like one of the sisters had mentioned, when you go to Facebook, you do see a lot of this stuff as far as it being more of a show. And one thing that has always been in my spirit, our people have always been, from what I read, a private people. But it seems, now as if Passover, and not even just Passover, other holy days as well, is being publicized on a level where it's not so much a sacred thing as it had been. It's more of, look what I'm doing, look how I'm dressed. And I'm not trying to put anyone down. I'm just trying to point out that a lot of the sacred part of what we're supposed to be
remembering gets kind of drowned out when you look onto social media. Another point that I wanted to bring out is that I think it's important to, for me personally, I do think it's important to at least attempt to have a tradition or to keep the feast in a way, meaning obviously we all know that we cannot keep the feast how it's mentioned in the scriptures. The biggest reason is because we don't have Levite priests. So we would, that's impossible. But I do think when you're coming into this way and for us rebuilding our knowledge and of who we are in our culture, that it's important to at least try to attempt, especially if you have families, because the children are the ones that need to understand why we're doing this thing and why we're keeping this way. Even if you can't make it to a big feast or, dress up all nice or whatever you feel like keeping it is, just having the memory of it and reading about it and teaching your children about it. I think that it's important to do that rather than focus on we're not in Jerusalem, because I feel that the Most High, the Most High Elohim knows our situation and knew that in this generation, this is the position that we would be in. And one thing that it makes me think of is in Judges, the last chapter and the last verse, it says that Israel, during that time, we didn't have anyone to rule over us, so everyone did as he pleased. And that just stuck out to me because I feel that that's the type of time that we're in now. We all kind of do as we please, and in a sense, meaning that we don't have exactly the right formula to do these things, but we're well aware of who we are. We're well aware of what we can read in the scripture and try to apply it to our lives as best as we can. So in some form, we're all doing that. We're all doing what is pleasing to ourselves, to our families, trying to strive to keep this way. So I just wanted to kind of point some of those things out and just let you all know that y'all are doing a great job, and I appreciate this conversation. Shalom.
Toda for that. Thank you for calling in and sharing your thoughts. We appreciate you. Once again, we're at the 9:26 hour, if my computer is correct, and we are under the Palm Hebrew Women Speak. If you want to call in and join the conversation, now is a great time to call because after 10 p.m., I don't think you'll be able to get through. So the number here is 319-527-6239. Press 1 to join the conversation. Tonight's topic is the do's and the don'ts of Pesach. And we have a little bit of a disagreement as to whether or not it can be considered obedience if all of the aspects of the Pesach keeping are not in place. We do have another caller. We want to bring that person in, and I want to get him. Before we go to the phone lines, we have Emma's thoughts on the extracurricular happening at the events that I really want to hear a little bit about. And Emuna, before we go there, Emuna, do you want to say anything about what you've heard so far from the caller or the panel, or just any way you want to weigh in, and then we'll have Ima Naomi, and then we'll go to the caller.
I want to thank the caller for calling in and sharing her thoughts on the matter. Weighing in on what I've heard thus far is basically we all enter at different points, and it seems as though we try to tailor-make the Torah to our specifications. And here, as the caller stated, as the book of Judges stated, this is where we have everyone does according to what's in their own heart. This is where we have so much confusion because we're tailor-making the Torah, the testimony, to our specifications. And anytime we're interfacing with the true and living power, the eternal laws of the universe, it never works in our favor. You understand what I'm saying? There's some things where, yes, you will have grace, you will have mercy. And then there are other things where the Torah clearly shows us that, listen, this is the specifications. And I like the analogy that Malaka gave to where, listen, if you don't have this thing, this is where the humility comes in and say, Moses, I don't have this thing. What would you have me to do? What am I to do? Because you gave me these directions, but I don't have the capacity to fulfill the directions. Where do I go from here? And as I will continue to say, I will always say, this is the recipe. There is a recipe for our return. If we look out into the landscape and we see all of the anarchy, we see all the bickering, we see all the fighting, we see all the contention, at the base of that is pride and ego. The opposing that is humility, which we are lacking greatly. Our foreparents did not have all of the fineries of Strongs and Thesauruses and Briggs and everybody else, but guess what they would say? You know what? Let me go and beseech the Most High about that. Moshe, let me go and beseech. Hey, what would do with him? I don't really know. Let me beseech the Most High about that, and get on one accord of being okay and saying, you know what, Most High, because the reality, and I wouldn't want to say this, Jerusalem is not just some metaphysical place that we can synthesize away. You understand what I'm saying? The whole basis of the promise to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov is, I'm going to take you to this place. And so the thought is, yes, there's a spiritual side of names, but there's also the physical location that is the heart of the earth that the Most High say, I have given you. And the reason you're not here is because you disobeyed. And my promise to you through all of the prophets is I'm going to take you back. And we are at the stage standing looking to say, it's not really that important if I get back. And the Most High is looking at it because it's written in His Word, I'm going to take you back. I'm going to return you to the land that I promised to my forefathers. And so I would have to stand with David on this if I forget Jerusalem. It says Raquel is mourning for her children. I stand with David on this one. I cannot forget the oath that the Most High promised, because this is what everything is hinging on. Not to just say that we were in the land and we still did evil, understandable. But the reason Yisrael was supposed to, it says the law is supposed to go forth. We're supposed to be light onto the earth. But there's certain things that has to be in place, and our foreparents knew that captivity wasn't it. And for those who didn't, but there was always a remnant who didn't want to come back, and that's also understandable. But it will help us and behoove us to clearly identify who we are. You see what I'm saying? Because who we are is going to determine how we give information to one another. You know what I'm saying? New, old, because I've come in contact with people who lost hope and said, you know what, I'm just going to resolve to be here. And that's the way they view, that's the lens by which they view what the Torah, however our experiences are, does not negate what the Torah says at the end of the day. And so for the listening audience, I would say, keep that in the forefront of your mind. It may not be you, but you prepared a generation behind you in the same which Moshe prepared a generation behind him, even though it wasn't him. And we don't water down that promise, because that promise is going to usher in all of the things that the Most High promised us and left on oath with our foreparents. So I'll relinquish the mic on that.
Enough for that. Ima, before we go to the callers, did you want to weigh in on the extracurricular at some of these Pesach events where that A for effort is being claimed and there's still quite a few extras being added, while there are so many things that are supposed to be there are still not in place? Do you want to weigh in on that now, or should we go to the callers?
Sure, I'll make a comment on it. I was so surprised when you told me about this marriage mart type foolishness going on at some of these events. I didn't even know about that. And I thought I'd been around for a while, but I didn't know about that kind of foolishness going on, and I certainly don't condone anything like that. As far as when you say extracurricular activities, what specifically are you talking about? Because I've missed the first part of the broadcast, so I may have missed that. What exactly are you speaking of?
I was politely referring to the meet and greets of courtship intention. I was just referring to it as an extracurricular activity, because it's not on the original curriculum that the Most High laid out for us in Exodus 11 or 12. And so with there being elements taken away, it's interesting that we have these new things in the land that can only be considered extra. So I was using a euphemism of sorts when referring to.
Well, you were being very polite and all that kind of stuff.
You raised me well, Iman. You raised me well.
Yeah, but however, I'm telling you, that kind of nonsense. I'm sorry, I'm a Levite according to what we believe, and I have to tell it like it is. That's nonsense, and it should not go on at any commemoration that you say that you're honoring the Most High.
Well, all right.
Granted, we're lacking in the things that we can do. We're in a foreign land. We don't have this. We don't have that. We don't have the other. And I agree. I do smile upon those people who are putting forth an effort. I have to agree with Amuna, though, and I've said this many, many years ago. It has to be that spirit of humility. In order for us to even come together, somebody has to be willing, or somebody has to be willing to bend. They have to be willing to say, listen, I don't have it right. I'm not sure that I have it right. I'm not sure about my conclusions. But let's get together. Let's try to do the best that we can. Let's try to come together as one community. Because we have it now. That's why I published that schedule of holy days, and I show you. I'm down to 3 different days because I'm not even considering that full moon stuff and all the rest of the other garbage. It would be 10 pages long. But what happens is that none of them, I noticed, and I've met with some of these people in person who are not willing to bend. They're not willing to compromise. They're not willing to be humble enough to say, well, maybe I don't have it right. I mean, they say that outwardly, but they don't really mean that because their attitude is so rigid. Well, it's got to be this way or not. And my point is this. If we're truly trying to get back to the Most High, we understand that we've been separated from this history, heritage, culture, this laws, statutes, and commandments for so long, for so many generations. Even though we've had some aspects of it that we carried with us, we still were basically separated from this. So that being the case, why can't we then? Why can't we say, well, let's get together and try to make this a communal thing where we're all basically on the same page? Always not amazes me because I'm not that surprised, but it always gets to me that somehow we don't feel that we need to bend, yet still we're saying that we're striving for righteousness. I don't get it. I really don't get it. And I apologize for being naive even at this old age, but I just don't get it. It seems to me it's just very, very easy. Well, I can't say very, very easy, but I can say it would be easy enough to forego your feelings of superiority to just humble yourself enough to say, well, this is in honor of the Most High. It's not in honor of the Fa or the Nasi or the Moreh or the Kohen. We got Nasi'im and Kohanim and Morim and all the rest of them with these lofty titles. We got chiefs and prince chiefs and head chiefs and all that kind of stuff. And yet somebody's coming together. Everybody's doing their own thing. And as it is, we're a small community. We're a small community compared to the bulk of our people. And we still can't seem to get it. We still can't seem to get it together. I don't get it. I really don't get it, So, like I said, it's going to take some humility. I have to agree with the mood on that. It's going to take some humility. It's going to take some people who are willing to bend. It's going to take some coming together and seriously considering that we're going to do this to honor the Most High. So that's my take on it. As for those extracurricular activities, if it ain't in the book, leave it alone. And if you want to have a marriage march, pick another time, pick another festival, declare your own festival, like they do sometimes in Israel, that New World Passover. Declare your own festival and have that kind of stuff going on if you want to. Zehu.
So for that was the voice of our elder, Ima Naami, over 70 years strong. So when we hear our elders say, this is probably a bad idea, it's not bad to consider ourselves or to bethink ourselves, as Scripture tells us to do, especially when we can easily see that this is not in the Scriptures. It certainly does not belong to these high holy days. And as I said before, let's kind of think about this issue of fear. The whole duty of man is to fear him and to keep what he has commanded. And I must admit, I don't see the element of fear in these congregations that could introduce this kind of dating element to such an important moment. I mean, that's why I gave the background and foundation as to how we even got to this event, what it was about, what the climate was. I mean, if we're talking about reclaiming the culture, then how hard is it to read what the context was? If we're talking about what we want to reproduce, there are things we can't reproduce, but reproducing as these conversations and concepts of humility and saying that's not what this is about. At the time, we were looking at our lives. 10 plagues were going on. Nobody was thinking about who has a white corsage. No one was doing that. We're not reproducing the moment, even by any measure. But before I go on my soapbox, I'll step down. Again, I invite anyone from any of these congregations to present a view right now live on the air. I'm confident that somebody will be confronting us in the comment section when this goes on YouTube, but I would love to have this conversation with you while we're on the air. So having said that, I'm very thankful for those of you who have already called in. We have 2 callers on the line. So could you go ahead and open up their phone lines and talk to the callers?
All right, let's go to 865-282. You're live there.
Hey, peace and blessings from the Israel God in Christ. This is Bishop Eliyahu, and peace to the panel and the sisters.
Shalom, brother. Thank you, and welcome to the conversation.
Hey, shalom. First of all, I want to say I want to be celebrating the Pesach, and I want to be celebrating it this weekend, what people call Friday evening to Saturday evening. It's going to fall on the Holy Sabbath. I keep the seventh-day Sabbath as well. So for those keeping it during that time, I just wanted to say peace and blessings unto them. And I just wanted to say something that I heard earlier about the calculation of the time, and just give my position on that a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure, brother. We have another caller. If you can keep it within the time, we would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, because there were some do's and don'ts, and I think that that was something I struggled with very early, and my search for when exactly does the Passover fall. But there's some information you can look into. I just want to throw some of it out there. We know that the ancient Israelites always went by what we may call the Judean Sanhedrin, or the Sanhedrin court, almost like the high court. They basically dictated everything. They were the final say up underneath the Most High God. So before the fall of Jerusalem, we know that there was a rabbi that calculated the time. They knew that Rome was coming in. There's going to be destruction. Calculated a good ways off. I can remember off of memory that around the year 359 AD or something like that, I know that there was a rabbinic Jew named Hillel, the second. He was the head of the Sanhedrin, and he put a calculated time in place. Where I started looking into also was the neighbors of the Yehudim, or the Jews, which were the Arabs. We know from the time of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, and that which came to follow with Ramadan and the different set feasts that they had. We know that they calculated and put their place in time before the Jewish Sabbath, and they didn't also want to bring worship on the what they would call at that time the Christian Sabbath, or the first day of worship that was put in place by Rome and the church. And I know some people would argue with me about that, from who follow after Christianity. But the point is, when they put that in place, coming all the way down, we see that that was in about the 6th century on. So there's I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe, that he was keeping the Torah according to the truth and according to what God had put in place. And from that time that Christ was keeping the Pesach, or the Passover, even down to the time when he was crucified, I believe that there's a very strong case that we have a succession and of that time coming down. And I don't think it was confused I think that a lot of people just don't look very deep into those things. So I just wanted to share that. And I also wanted to say to those who want to accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior that he is our Passover. And, the mystery, what God really requires of us during that time is to be unleavened from wickedness and to be eating the bread, unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And I appreciate you allowing me to say that.
Well, we appreciate you calling in and introducing a thought that I would venture to believe is quite controversial, that the Passover gets usurped by the execution of the New Testament Messiah. And I'm sure the panel and the callers will have plenty to say about that. I look forward to their thoughts. Thank you so much for your call. Moving on to the next caller, can we open the mic and meet that person, Sal?
All right, let's go to 410-488. Live there.
Oh, hallelujah.
Somebody want to sing that.
Thank you so much for calling, Sissy. Yeah. Thank you for that. Hallelujah. What are your thoughts on
Yahuwah? Praise Yahuwah at every opportunity, every occasion, entirely, exclusively Yisrael. Hallelujah. Shalom, Mishpoka. Shalom, Yisrael. I just wanted to, I've been listening intently to the wonderful speakers. Shalom, barakot, peace and blessings to all of y'all. I love y'all to pieces. I wish I could meet y'all face to face one day soon. But I just
we love you too. May I ask calling? What's your name, sister?
This is our coach, Marcia.
Oh, shalom.
Marcia Ben Levi Tazak.
Shalom.
I just wanted to just do a flashback into Bamidbar, a.k.a. Numbers 6, and what is called in a lot of the English translations as the priestly blessing, the Barakat Kohanim. And one thing that we do see in that, when you read through the entire, Yehovah said to Moshe, tell Aaron and his sons, this is how you are to bless Bnei Yisrael, or the children of Yisrael, saying unto them, Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face to shine upon you and be favorable unto you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. And the last part of that, in the English it reads, and they shall put my name upon Bnei Yisrael, or upon the children of Yisrael, and I will bless them. So they shall put my name on Bnei Yisrael, the children of Yisrael, and I will bless them. So the name of Yehovah is upon Bnei Yisrael, the children of Yisrael, the progeny of Yisrael, all around the world. So the name is on us wherever we at. Hallelujah. I just wanted to bring that out because that is something that came out of the mouth of Yehovah, that his name is placed, put, stamped upon Bnei Yisrael. Hallelujah.
Well, hallelujah. I think that's an interesting point, sir. Before we go to our last caller, we've had two very interesting assertions given by our callers. This idea that the Pesach has been represented due to a New Testament event, and also the question of we are the name, the Most High. We are the name of the Most High. That where He put His name is He put His name on us. So does that mean that even when we're outside of Jerusalem, that we can keep Pesach in these ways because the name follows where we are, and we are in the diaspora. So with that being a question, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily what the caller was saying, but I have heard it said in the trenches. So is it that Jerusalem follows us, and where we are means that we can keep Pesach and we can have this rise to obedience? Is there this idea that we can keep it outside of Jerusalem, a valid assertion? And can the event of the execution of the New Testament Messiah change even the need for keeping Pesach, or the way we think about and keep Pesach? The floor is yours. I'm not going to limit who chimes in, so whoever feels led to say something, the floor is yours.
Yeah, this is Amuna. There's a portion of the text that the Most High's name is placed on Israel. But when we look at, if we're going to go by what the text says, not adding and taking away, if someone is on a far journey and they're too far from the land, the question, it says 3 times in a year shall all males appear. Like this would have to probably be a whole other conversation of all of the prescription, the recipe for Pesach. We can't Chex mix it. 3 times in a year shall all men appear to a place that was specified, that had the people and the servants who were there to do the job that they were prescribed to do. And if we're not, and it even says if someone's on a far journey and they miss it the first month, they can come back in the second month, and that's the only feast, or not even feast, the observance, because Pesach is Pesach and then the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? But that's the only observance that you get to come in the second month. My point is, if we don't acknowledge the truth of us not able to do what is prescribed and left on record, we're going to make up all of these reasons as to why what we're doing is sufficient. But if we acknowledge that what we're doing is not sufficient, then we will have the humility to come together to beseech the Most High to get the solution. We don't have the solution, and the reason we can tell we don't have the solution is just look onto the landscape. And the quicker we come to terms with that is the quicker that we can be heard when we call unto the Most High. Hear me when I call Most High. If we want the Creator to hear us, then we have to be willing to listen. And I know sometimes we've been doing it for so many years, and then one must ask themselves, well, how has it been going for you? We have children coming behind us, grandchildren, great-grandchildren coming behind us. We can't keep telling the same story. We have to be and think we're going to get a different result. I agree with Malaka. Remember, rehearse these things. Tell it into the ears of the children, but don't dupe them. Don't feed them the hype. Because if we forget Jerusalem, that way he said it. How am I going to forget? When this whole thing, yes, there's the spiritual part of who we are, but how are we going to forget? How are we going to pretend like we're doing something that we're not? Come on.
Well, do you want to weigh in on the thought that the Messiah of the New Testament took on the Passover, that he is this Passover lamb? I'm not sure if the caller is an Israelite or maybe a Messianic Israelite or even part of the Christian. But I'm not sure. And I don't want to assume. But this idea that is very much something that a lot of us heard when we were still participating in the church. Some Messianics brought that with them. What are your thoughts about the New Testament Messiah taking on the Passover and affecting how it is kept? If you want to comment on that, or if maybe someone else wants to weigh in on that.
I remember one time I'm not afraid to have conversations with brothers and sisters who have different views. And one of the questions was, is he the Passover lamb or the Yom Kippur offering? Because to take away the sins of the world, one would have to be the Yom Kippur, right? Passover didn't take away the sins of the world. So then we begin to have this conversation of, okay, if you are the Passover lamb, did you fulfill X, Y, and Z? That would be a whole other conversation for another day. And if so, then this is why people will say, well, I can do it to the best of my ability because the land part I don't really got to worry about. And so this is where we get all of these different factions, we get all of these different groups, we get all of these different splinters because it's how we're processing Torah, how we're processing New Testament, how we're processing all the things that have been said. And that's something that definitely needs to be addressed and looked through. I don't think it can be, dealt with in this specific moment, but I'll just leave that on the table because I've asked it, in private conversations, is he Passover lamb or is he the Yom Kippur offering that takes away sin? Because once a year is the sins of the nation taken away. It's a national day of sin taking away, right? That's Yom Kippur, which is all the way in the 7th month. We're in the 1st month. So we would have to kind of say which one is it, and I'm quite sure we'll probably get many different answers as it relates to that. But hopefully that helped on answering that question, and I'll relinquish the mic.
So for that, is there anyone else that wants to weigh in on what we've heard from the conversation, from the callers, And these new thoughts that were introduced, this idea that we are, wherever we are, the name is, and this idea of the New Testament Messiah having a place in this Passover conversation. Imana Ami Malaka Ashanti. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, this is Sister Ashanti. I'll go first. We're talking about the Messiah here. I do believe in Yeshua the Messiah. Others don't believe that Yeshua the Messiah is the Messiah. Some believe he hasn't came yet. I don't mind what anybody believes. What I'll say is this. If you read Luke 22, yes, you'll find the account of Yeshua, Jesus, observing Passover festival of matzah, unleavened bread. And you look at John, I believe it's chapter 1. I believe when John the Baptist was saying, behold the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world. Okay. This is what I'll say. I came out of the Christian church and read this Bible from front to back for the first time starting at the age of 32. Before I read the Bible, I had to clean slate everything that the Christian church taught and began to read the Bible. What happened was I got a new set of lenses to look at the Bible from. Like, and I know I'm going slow with this, and I'm going slow with this for a reason. What the Christendom world has painted of Jesus, Messiah, it's tainted a lot of Scripture, and it's tainted a lot of the commentary of the Gospels, to where you have to ask the Most High for discernment to peel off the layers of the New Testament and what people interpolated and what the translators did a discernment on and things of that nature. If you look at Genesis to Malachi or Genesis to Chronicles, especially you look at Hosea, you start to see what the Messiah was going to do and the intent of the Messiah coming. We just had to take away the sins of the world. Do you really know what that means, to take away the sins? Okay, if you look at the offerings and what the offerings meant, from the asham or the guilt, the hatat or the sin offering, the oil or the burnt offering, there's offerings for intentional sins and unintentional sins. You know what I'm talking about? And then there's also, the tribes of Israel being broken up. You have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Then in Ezekiel 37, right, you got the two sticks. The Most High said he's going to bring the two sticks back together. And Hosea, he says, hey, take this prostitute, go marry her and have some kids with her. Okay, I'm teaching you a lesson now that, I'm going to actually bring back my marriage, to Israel. You're like, okay, how you going to bring back a marriage to Israel when you divorce somebody in Jeremiah 3 and then in Deuteronomy, 22 or 24, somewhere, he says, hey, you can't go back, bride you had after that bride put you away. So when you go into Genesis to Malachi and really look at the story, you understand that it's not exactly taking away the sins of the world. It's taking away, or it's bringing back what was taken away for the transgressions. Now, Sister Amuna said, atonement. How is the Messiah the Lamb? Well,
no. I think that what she, and to be clear, because we don't want it to go too far off topic. I get that this opens up a kind of a rabbit hole into a totally different thought about the purpose and intention of the execution of the New Testament Messiah, and I think that is a good conversation we should have. But I think the question that Amuna levied was this, and is this a Passover analogy, or is it a Yom Kippur analogy, and that the forwarding thought is that it cannot be both. And I do want you to weigh in on that, but we do have a caller waiting in the wings. So are you okay with us taking that caller, and then we'll revisit that question?
Hey, are you talking to me?
Oh, no, Ashanti, because Ashanti was one addressing the issue of... Yes, Ashanti, is it okay that we come back to this question after we take the caller?
Sure thing, most definitely.
Okay, hallelujah. Caller, the mic is yours. Sal, you can go ahead and open up their line.
All right, we got a Skype caller. You're on the line.
Shalom to the panel. Shalom, Sal. Shalom, sister. Shalom, Ima.
Hey, shalom.
This conversation just started getting a little real. So I will begin by saying I am a Messianic believer. I believe in Yeshua, but also I believe that there are some things that are taken out of I don't want to say taken out of context, but looked at differently. But I will first begin by saying that we have to treat this as a memorial. We are not in the land. We don't have all of the things in place that we need to. And we also need to take into account that our forefathers were actually in bondage when they first received this law, when they first received the ordinance of how to keep Passover. So, and Sister Imona brought out some really good points about having to teach this to our children, and we need to let them know, we have to let them know that this is something that we are observing the best that we can, because we are in bondage, because our forefathers broke the law, and we have even broken the law because we were taught wrong. So from that respect, it is a memorial. Just to briefly touch on Mashiach Yeshua, the New Testament actually compares him to all of the Moedim, all of the feast days. And so we would have to go through and just properly put those things into context, and that would be a completely different concept. And I hope that the bishop that called in, I don't want to speak for the brother, but I hope that he wasn't trying to infer that Jesus or, Yeshua, Yahusha, Yahawashai, whatever dialect of Hebrew we all speak, I hope he wasn't insinuating that he is now the Passover lamb and that we don't have to keep the Passover. And I don't think that's what he was inferring, because he said that he is keeping the feast. So then we have to therefore, I guess, really dig into things of spiritual context and things of that nature, and it becomes a whole different talk. But just in the end, in closing, to speak to, hopefully that we can start to look at this thing from a unified perspective. I think Ima spoke on it best, is we have to humble ourselves and begin to say, okay, we don't really know everything that is involved with this, but in order to at least show the Most High that we are trying, and I know that trying is not good enough. I was taught that perfect practice makes perfect, not practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. So we can't be perfect in this point because we aren't home, but we do have to at least make an effort. And if we're making an effort, then we have to be truthful and say that this is a memorial and we are doing the best that we can. And as we grow and as we come to more knowledge, then the Most High will set us correct. And as for this ignorance of auctioning at the feet, like that type of stuff is so ridiculous. I hate that we even have to talk about it, but we have to because it's going on. So if you're a new person coming into this, that is not what the Most High prescribed. Right? It is our goal and our job to do exactly what the Most High prescribed. And until we get home, we will not be able to do that. So while we are in bondage, while we are in our land of captivity, we should do the best that we can to please the Most High. And other than that, a lot of this contention really could stop if we would just humble ourselves. So I thank you, sisters, for having a conversation. I think you're doing a wonderful job, and continue to do everything that you're doing, and peace and blessings.
Thank you so much for that, Brother Toda, for calling in. Thank you for your encouragement and support. We appreciate you. And we really appreciate your thoughts on giving some clarity as to how the New Testament Messiah might be fitting into this conversation from a Hebraic Messianic perspective. So we appreciate that. Again, we don't know from what angle, what vantage the other caller was coming from, and we do not want to give the impression that we're going to assume on his behalf the caller is correct, that we don't want to do that. We do not want to do so. But we'll bring it back to the panel now. The caller made some great points. What are your thoughts about what the previous caller said, what the placement of the New Testament Messiah might be, and some of the other things that we have been discussing so far? Not Imuna, but Ima Naami. So what are your thoughts about what you have heard from the panel and from the callers about this aspect?
The aspect of the New Testament, or the aspect of JJ being the Passover lamb?
Yeah, the assertion that perhaps his life and death have some bearing on the Pesach conversation and keeping and obedience.
Well, I've heard that over many years. I mean, from way back in the day. I'm not young, so I had to hear from grandparents and grandaunts and grand uncles and cousins and everything like that about that very same concept before I even came into understanding. I want to be polite and say that I know that our people have these thoughts, and I know that this is some of our thinking. I cannot say in all truthfulness that I respect it, simply because I've read, I understand more about the New Testament, and I understand more about how we came to those beliefs. I don't even know how to put it nicely or anything. I don't know if I can even put it nicely. I don't think that I don't think that they fit into the Passover conversation, because they really have nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. For what they say are the actual historic facts. Had nothing to do with it, except that it was during this particular time that these events that surround their deity seem to have taken place. Other than that, I don't see the validity of connecting it to the Pesach. It's particularly when they want to name their deity. But hold on, you mute the train is going by, and I don't want you to get that noise in your ear. Hold on one second. Okay, I don't see hooking the deity to this event at all. And I do understand, like I said, I do understand the historical significance that Christians throughout the world tried to put to this particular event. They claim that the Last Supper was the Passover supper, and if that's the case, I understand all of that, but I just don't, with my understanding, I know that the two events are not connected, not really connected, but our people have made a connection nevertheless. I'll put it that way. I'm bungling this. I'm really saying this badly. I'm sorry, but it just strikes me, I guess, after having been in law so long, that I do realize the bulk of our people are into these other beliefs. It just strikes me every time I hear it, and it just sort of throws me off a little bit. So please forgive me.
No, understandable. We're all going, and that's another thing. It's hallelujah about our platform is that we have a number of sisters in different stages of study and in different stages of understanding, and so and even so, we always have very respectful conversations and exchanges, and we're able to disagree or explore each other's positions in this way. So hallelujah. It's not, it's not that we all get together to have a hymn party and high five one another. So it's okay for us explore the ideas. We're a good representation of the community, and so I'm really, really thrilled to have so many mature, respectful women on this panel so that we can have some of these tough conversations and uncomfortable ones. As Amuna said at the top of the hour, it's going to get a little uncomfortable in this conversation. So hallelujah. Malaka, Sal, before I go to Malaka, do we have another caller?
Yeah, we have some callers standing by.
Oh, really? Malaka, I really want to bring you into this conversation, but should we go to the caller first, or do you want to weigh in before we do that?
I say go to the callers. Let's bring the callers in.
Okay, well, we're now at the 10 o'clock hour. The phone number here is 319-527-6239, and I'm told that we will be on the air a little bit longer, so go ahead and get your call in. Press 1 so you can weigh in on the conversation. So I'll open up the phone lines to our next caller.
All right, let's go to 716-541. You're live.
Thank you, Sal, for taking my call. And I would like to say good evening to the sisters on the panel.
Good evening. Welcome to the conversation.
Okay, now the topic is the Passover. Now, in the New Testament, is it not referred to as in the Old Testament, is it not referred to as the Passover in the Torah?
Is your question, is the Passover called the Passover in the Torah?
Yes, in the Torah. I'm hearing Pascha, but what is it in the Torah?
Okay, Passover is English. Obviously, the Torah would not have been written in English. So when you hear people referring to it as Pesach, Pesach is the Hebrew word that gets translated as Passover. If you are reading it in English, yes, the word you'll be confronted with is Passover. But if you are reading it in Hebrew, the word you would hear is Pesach.
Pesach. Okay, so what is the purpose of Pesach?
Well, as we described, I gave the entire rundown to the history of Israel, why Israel went into Egypt, how we eventually go into captivity, and that the Creator brings us out of the space of captivity through a series of events, and that there's a point where we are spared from the judgment that was given to Egypt, and in this way it passes over Israel, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel. And then there's a list of things in Exodus 11 and 12 that tells us how that was done and how our people kept it when we were able to keep it.
Well, yes. Well, to me, we call it the Passover, but I thought it was really about the fact that death passed over Israel. I mean, all of Egypt's firstborn children died. That is what
many things
happened.
That's what I just said, that there were 10 plagues. And again, we discussed that at the top of the hour. There were 10 plagues that were set as judgments against Egypt, and all of them passed over us because of the things that we were instructed to do. And I think that's a great point, because had we not followed those instructions, those things would not have passed over us at all. And so this question is, can we play around, can we fiddle with those instructions now and still call it obedience? I'm sorry, I didn't get
your brother.
This is Mayana. I didn't get your name.
Oh, Doris.
Welcome to the conversation, Sister Doris.
Welcome. Now, my last question is, so are you saying that it's just a Old Testament ritual for just for Israelites? That's it.
I would never put the word just in front of anything that the Most High commands of His people, but the Passover was given to Israel, and according to our records, anyone that was joined unto Israel at the time, in terms of whether they were in our household or participating with us, and sisters, please weigh in and correct me if I'm wrong, but if they were circumcised among the men, they were allowed to participate. If they were willing, if they were among us, they were allowed to participate in Passover. Again, though, according to the instructions laid out in Exodus 11 and 12, including being circumcised in the flesh. On the panel, am I incorrect about that? Iman, Naami, Amuna, Sister Malaka, Ashanti, do we have a different remembering about?
I agree with what you just said.
I agree. If the Imas remember it differently. Am I correct about that? Were other nations allowed to participate, provided they were circumcised? And I don't want to claim to be the authority on all things Torah, so I have people on the panel.
You're correct.
They were circumcised and believers.
Oh, hallelujah. Okay, I just have to check in with the elder because, I have a 72-year-old elder on the panel. I'm not going to pretend to know more than her. So do you feel that we have adequately answered your question, Sister Doris?
Well, yes, because in the beginning I didn't know this. You were saying that they are actually like slaying a lamb and they're having an auction? For real?
Who's they?
The ISUPK?
ISUPK has shared with the public that they have attempted the requisite that a lamb is to be slain. That's what it says to do, and so they have made every attempt to properly fulfill what they have been instructed to do, which includes slaughtering the lamb themselves, and they have shared that they have done that, yes. In terms of auctioning, it's a language that we're using at some of these events where women who have not already found husbands, because there are all of these other men already there, that they're using this as an opportunity to, I guess, nation build, as they would consider it, nation building. And so what you're hearing the panel say is that's probably not the appropriate time to address that particular community concern, because Pesach has this other purpose. And so we're not against Israelites meeting and creating families and households, but this is probably not the time. This is definitely not the time to do so.
Okay, this is exactly what the name of your program is tonight, Do's and Don'ts. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for calling and giving us an opportunity for clarity. Shall we have another caller?
All right, let's go to the next caller. Let's go to 865-282 live.
Hey, peace and blessing. This is Bishop Eliyahu, and I called earlier. I wanted to answer the Sister Amuna's question because she had a very good question, actually. Am I coming through?
Well, thank you for calling back. Absolutely. If you want to give clarity to the conversation, thank you for calling back.
Hey, amen. Praise God. With the situation with Jesus Christ is very important because salvation is what I believe that is at stake and eternal life. So when it says, "Behold, the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world," it's referring to the Pesach sacrifice or the Passover, because Jesus was our Passover crucified for us, sacrificed for us. So when you look at the atonement, that actually happens later, because in the Passover, the children of Israel were brought out of the land of Egypt. Later on, we know they were given the law. So when Jesus Christ, the Passover, was crucified later on, they were given the Holy Spirit sent down from heaven with the law written on their mind and on their heart, see, in the same way. Now, the atonement came later because, when you have the temple which Solomon built, and when you look at the temple which Jesus Christ prophesied that was going to be destroyed in 70 A.D., the connection between the two, most scholars would agree that they were destroyed about the 9th of Ab, around the time of atonement, the Day of Atonement. And it's important because in both those times, Israel was not accepted before God. When the temple was destroyed in the time of which Jesus Christ prophesied there, and when that Day of Atonement came and the temple was destroyed, and basically all the people were, slaughtered, and those taken into captivity and those killed with the sword and chased down with the sword, we see at that time that happened because of the rejection of Messiah and because of the gospel. So when you go past this point, that's why you keep talking about this captivity, it's because of that blindness which Yahweh Elohim has put upon those who reject Messiah. We call it the spirit of Antichrist, the spirit of delusion. And what happens with this spirit of delusion that comes into the world, it comes upon the hearts and minds of those people that don't have the blood of the Lamb. So this is like a little taste of the mystery of what I'm dealing with when we talk about spiritual exodus, when we talk about coming out of the old covenant into the new. Because in the first one, the people who were led out of Egypt, the Israelites, they were spiritually blind. They were children in whom had no faith that had veil upon their heart. That's what Yahweh says. So when we deal with those who reject Messiah, we see this 2,000-year captivity, if you want to say this. This 2,000-year captivity is because they reject Jesus the Christ. So this captivity that you're looking for to end, okay, is not going to happen until the coming of Messiah. I mean, I know people don't believe that there's a Messiah coming. If you agree it's Jesus or not, that's one thing. But it's not going to happen until Messiah comes because of the blindness. His blindness is because of the rejection of the gospel. So I wanted to share that because that's the accurate understanding when you deal with Jesus Christ being the Passover, who was crucified or sacrificed, and you deal with the Day of Atonement. When he was sacrificed, that's not the atonement, if you will, goat, or the blood of, the one that was brought into the temple. Jesus Christ represents the high priest in that scenario, and he goes into the true temple, just as the high priest went into the tabernacle. The tabernacle didn't come until after the Passover sacrifice. So, I mean, in this way, like the caller who said before, Jesus fits the multifaceted feast that we have. He fits these different things. He is the fulfillment of these things. And, pretty much anybody who reads the New Covenant can see that. So I just want to share that.
Okay, so I think the question is you in your first call you said that you will be keeping or having the memorial of Pesach, but now it sounds like you're saying that the Pesach was the New Testament Messiah, and I think that was the point that we want. So which is it? Are you going to have Pesach or participate in Pesach, or are you of the mind that the Pesach has been and passed?
Okay, the Pesach is very important because Jesus said you have to eat his flesh and drink his blood in John chapter 6. So when you look at what it's talking about, he's talking about partaking of the Passover. That's what we do in remembrance of him. Some people call it communion. Now, this is really important because this is taking place on the Pesach, or this is what Jesus said, do in remembrance of me on our Passover, or on the Passover of the Yehudim, when he gave it to the disciples of the apostles. So when we say Jesus is our Pesach, we're talking about the bread and we're talking about the wine, okay, or the blood and the body of Mashiach. And the reason, just to answer your question, I'll sum it up real quick, okay, because I see that you just want a short answer. Just to try to sum that mystery up.
Limitations, that's why.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Just to sum that up very quickly, dealing with Jesus Christ being our Passover, we celebrate that, or I do, according to the commandment of the apostles' doctrine, which we find in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. It says, therefore, let us keep the feast. But we're keeping it, you see, with the truth of the revealed mystery that was contained in the old, because we are in the new covenant, okay, or the Brit Kadashah. So that's just the difference of what you're doing in the old and we're doing in the new. We understand what those things mean in the old, and we're celebrating them openly in the new.
All right. I want us to be very careful about being divisive and saying this is what you're doing. I don't believe that you're trying to be divisive, but I want us to remain respectful and not be divisive. And we're doing something and we're kind of doing it better than you are. And I don't want anyone to do that on the Torah side or on the Messianic side. But thank you so much for your comment and for spending the time to clarify your thoughts so that we can do that. I have a question for Sal. I think we have one caller left in the queue. Sal, I have a question for you. Do we already have a discussion, debate, or roundtable about whether or not the New Testament Messiah is the Pesach? Is he the Passover lamb? I want to say that sounds like a familiar title. Do we already have that in the repertoire?
You know what? I think we pretty much do. I have to just look it up and see exactly what the title is. I believe we do.
I think we do. If we don't, maybe we have an opportunity to re-explore that idea about whether or not the New Testament Messiah was the Passover lamb. If there's anyone in the listening audience that thinks that would be a great topic, hit Sal up if you're willing to have that conversation and explore that further. I'm taking a little liberty here to say that Sal might be interested, and it's another good topic for possibly the men and even some sisters if they feel welcome to explore that thought. Sal, what do you think? Did I cross the line a little bit there?
Well, no, that's good. That's a good suggestion. But I do believe we have it in archives, maybe a couple of years ago,
yeah.
4 or 5 years ago. But if you could, we always revisit these topics, so that's fine.
That's great. Okay, yeah. So if you want to revisit the topic and put a little fresh idea on it, this idea of the wine, for me, this idea of the wine, I think Ima Naami might have a comment about including wine as a thought for the Passover. I'll bring her back into the conversation and the entire panel, including, in fact, I'll begin with Sister Malaka. Malaka, do you want to weigh in before we take the next caller?
No, I'm gathering my thoughts, so I think we should go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So we'll go to Malaka and Ima Naami about a lot of the things that we're hearing. We will be live still until the 11 o'clock hour, so you do have some time. If you want to call 319-527-6239 and press 1 to join this important conversation about the do's and the don'ts about Passover. Do you have questions about what Passover is about? How did we get here? And are we really celebrating the Pesach here with our limited resources and restricted ability? So next caller, please. The mic is yours.
All right, we have a Skype caller on the line. You on there, Skype caller?
Shalom, it's me again. I called in earlier. Just wanted to take the time first because I heard Ima's frustration with what is being said, and I want to make it clear, like, Ima has so much more knowledge than all of us in terms of how these things go, more study and more time in this, so we definitely need to take heed to her voice. But I also want to make it clear that and I won't speak for anyone else, myself personally, I'm not saying that the New Testament Messiah, because I know even the name causes so much frustration among Torah-only believers. I would hope that no one is saying that he is placing the need for the memorial of Pesach. I hope that is not what's being said. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there are some deeper spiritual connections that we see as New Testament believers, or what I call the renewed covenant, specifically in terms of eternal salvation. And there's many scriptures that we can go in. It's not my goal at all. But I want to state first that it is important to understand what happened in Exodus or Shemot, chapter, is it either 11 or 12? I'll say it's 12. There was no Levitical priesthood. The Levites didn't come along until Exodus 32, and I say that like that's a timeline, but it was later, right? The Levites didn't even come into play until the children of Israel began to worship the golden calf, and then we know what happened. The Levites sacrificed or killed 3,000 of those children. So those children of Israel. So there is a way to keep Passover, I guess, Pesach, without the priest. I'm not saying that the Most High has said, oh, that's what I want you to do, but that's all we have right now because we are in captivity. We don't have our priests. We don't have our temple. So without that, there is a way that is prescribed for us to do it. And in that way, they did. Every man was told to get a lamb as prescribed to their household. So that's all we can do right now is to do that in order to fulfill the Most High's ordinance. We don't have the priest, so we have to get a lamb and sacrifice it. But once again, in terms of the New Testament Messiah, I believe, and I won't speak for anyone else, I believe that there is a unity to both books, that if we were able to sit down and have a conversation, that we can show, at least I can show, why I believe these things and where there should be some unity, not a replacing of, not replacement theology. This is what's plaguing the world, I believe, this replacement of Jesus just fulfills and does away with everything. That is nowhere near what even the New Testament teaches, if we're being honest. So wasn't trying to be offensive. I hope that I didn't offend Emo or any of the sisters on the panel. I do believe that this is a memorial, something that we should teach our children to keep, and that there is some things that are taught in Exodus on how to keep that. But I also believe that there are some things that are prescribed for eternal salvation that the New Testament Messiah played in account of that. And that doesn't mean that we are saying that he is the Father, as in deity in that respect. I wanted to make that clear as well. Other than that, I do think this is something that we can revisit. Sal is the boss when it comes to that, but it is something that we could revisit with that. So, shalom, peace and blessings. Good job, Sister Mayana.
Shalom, Aki. Thank you so much for calling back and weighing in and give us some clarity. Sal, if you find that when we can put it in the description box about this larger conversation about the New Testament Messiah being the Pesach lamb. And I'm happy that the brother brought out that the use of the term New Testament Messiah helps to alleviate some of the discomfort around saying the name, as well, or disagreement upon the name, as well as this idea that has been thoroughly discussed that the term Messianic exists also in the Old Testament under a number of different auspices, used in a number of different ways. And so by saying New Testament Messiah, everybody knows who we're talking about, and nobody really has to argue over the logistics of the usage. So I appreciate the caller picking up on that and not taking it in any kind of divisive way. Having had that caller, it doesn't seem like we have anybody else that has pressed 1. I'm told we have a lot of people that are listening in. We appreciate the live audience, and we appreciate the audience that will be tuning in on the replay on YouTube. If you're looking for how can you check for us on YouTube, just go to www.youtube.com/Debate Talk for You, and you'll find not only Under the Palm and all of our past episodes, but the Man Up segment that we gave the shout out to earlier, as well as the Relationship Challenge. Stay tuned for the Relationship Challenge this time next Monday. It's every other Monday, hosted by Emuna Yisrael, and you can find all of the archived segments where we're covering practically everything under the sun just by going to YouTube. Subscribe to Debate Talk for You on our YouTube channel. So the floor is now returned to the panel. Malaka, have you gathered your thoughts? Do you want to weigh in?
I have gathered my thoughts. I'm going to be brief. And I really appreciate the brother that I'm so glad we went to his call first, because he helped me gather my thoughts. And I believe that's anonymous Hebrew. That brother brings fire. What I want to say is kind of just piggybacking on what he said, because he said it really well. I am a believer in Messiah, New Testament Messiah. I came into the Hebrew after having spent years in the church. And there are a lot of things that the church is teaching incorrectly, that they're teaching wrong, just straight head up wrong. And because of that, it keeps us sometimes from having these kinds of conversations in a civil way and in a loving way. And so I appreciate that we're having this kind of conversation tonight, and we are listening to each other and not necessarily debating, but sharing thoughts. I really appreciate that. You're doing an excellent job, Sister Mayana. I wanted to say that. I believe that one of the things that does ring true for me still is the belief that New Testament Messiah does present many of the the culmination or the spirit behind the feast days, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm probably going to get myself into a little pinch here with people who I don't want to offend anyone in the language that I'm using. But what I believe is that there is the physical aspect of the feast, and then there is the spiritual reasons or the spiritual lessons that the Most High is teaching us through the feast. And so when I observe the feast, I am observing the feast with an understanding of I say observing, when I'm memorializing the feast. I'm memorializing them to bring to remembrance, to recount, to retell, to pass this on to the generations. But I do believe that there is a spiritual component. There are spiritual lessons that I learned from these feasts as well. For example, the nation of Israel was born through the Passover. They passed through the blood and the water. They passed through the blood that was on the doorpost, and they passed through the water of the Red Sea. So they were reborn. They were born. They became a nation. That's a spiritual concept that is illustrated in physical ways. Through the retelling of the story, we talk about the physical experiences that the people went through and how they came out of that and became a nation. But then the spiritual analogies that we draw from that can relate to the New Testament Messiah is my paradigm. That's my perception. With the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we talk about, getting all the leaven out of the home and getting all the leaven out of the food that we eat. We're not eating any leaven. And we liken that leaven to sin, as the scripture does. It teaches the spiritual concept of leaven being sin. So when we talk about New Testament Messiah, we're saying, well, how does he fit into Passover, or how does he fit into atonement or Yom Kippur or these things? There are spiritual lessons that we believe that New Testament Messiah taught that show the spiritual intent behind the feast days, or the spiritual intent behind the law. Not to say that we do away with the law or we do away with the feast days, but we understand them more deeply. And I haven't set that out yet.
Sort of for that, we waited a little bit to hear from you, but it was well worth the wait. Imana Ami, the last caller addressed, wanted to reach out to you and clarify some things specifically to you in honor of your age and your stature as the imam in our discussion. So do you want to weigh in? Do you have anything you want to say to the young brother that hope to be clarified and understood?
Well, I just would like to say that I thank him very much for that respect that he has shown, and I really do appreciate that. I will pass on my comments because then that would have me going into the historicity of the supposed historicity of the New Testament, and that's not really a talk. Hold on 1 second, please. The train is going by again. Just 1 second. Sorry, I didn't want you to be subject to all of that noise. It's just not a subject that I wish to delve into tonight. It's a very exhausting subject. We've done it time and time again. We've had many conferences, workshops, talks, lectures, what have you. We've done YouTube. We've done any other kind of tube. As we've gone over it. We've debated it. We've hashed it out. And what we come to find is that people normally stick to their same positions, or those who change it will change it. So I don't really want to be disrespectful to anyone and get into that kind of debate tonight, particularly since the subject was, as I recall you saying, was that are we just commemorating, or are we actually observing, to the letter of the law, that kind of thing. And again, my conclusion would be that we are merely memorializing it, we're commemorating it, but we can't possibly do it in its entirety, because because of the restrictions that we have on us in our oppression. But I do, and I do respect, is those who have made to memorialize this particular season. I know that we probably are not doing it right. We're probably making a lot of errors, but that happens whenever you're coming back into understanding that has been lost to you for so long. So again, I commend all of those who are trying to at least do a semblance of it, at least come to some understanding. As we continue to practice, I believe that we will eventually get better, and we'll eventually get some more clarity on this particular issue, as well as the other holy days. We still have issues around those days as well. One of the things that I'd love to see almost immediately is a clarification of, not a clarification, but an agreement on the calendar. Whatever we decide to do these days, that we would do them in unison and not have these various dates thrown all around. But that's something I guess we're going to have to pray for humility and work on. I would say to the listening audience and to anyone who is celebrating this particular season, I pray that the Most High will bless your striving and that He'll bless anything that He finds in righteousness. Zehu.
Todayah, hallelujah. Thank you so much for that. We also have Ashanti, who's been quiet in the wings. I want to hear from her. And Amuna, so whichever one of you want to weigh in first, the floor is yours.
I'll weigh in first. This is Sister Ashanti. I just want to say ditto to everything Sister Angela said. I did want to also make a point that I didn't mention earlier when people slay lambs or whatever. A lot of us are getting back into the ancient ways of being in agriculture, being farmers, and also getting into keeping and raising livestock. A lot of what people do on the Passover is actually something they want to learn how to get into, which is, dealing in livestock, being shepherds. They've seen Israelites having bulls, goats, sheep, rams, lambs, and things of that nature. So they want to learn how to have sheep so they can shear and get the wool themselves. They want to learn how to go about raising their own meat so they can eat it. They want to learn the skills to skin, butcher, slaughter, and things of that nature. So sometimes this is practice for people who want to take on some of the ancient skills that we possess. We always talking about being self-sufficient. Well, that's a lot of things we got to do. Grow food, but also raise food as well. Get the wool and linen for clothes and such. So if we had our own sheep, we get our own wool. If we had our own fields, we can go get the cotton from our own field. You know what I mean? We're learning or relearning how to do these things, and we're incorporating these things back into our lives. So that's what I wanted to bring forth that I wanted to mention earlier, but could not.
For that, absolutely. There's a lot of us returning to agriculture, as you said, and some of us even exploring ways to live off the grid, so to speak. And so this is all part of, that's a great observation, that there's a lot of us participating in different elements of the return. Amuna, what are your thoughts?
Excellent conversation. Again, my thoughts are that there's two different things going on. The subject of the matter is Pesach, do's and don'ts, and the extracurriculars that are added on to the feast. Actually, Pesach is the observance. The feast is Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the question, to my understanding, is no problem with returning. There's no problem with bethinking ourselves. There's no problem with farming. There's no problem with agriculture. There's no problem, you know what I'm saying? There's no problem with any of those things. The issue comes in when we're not truthful with what it is that we're doing and what it is that we're trying to present to or pass off to the Creator as what He required of us. For me, that's where the problem comes in. It's not a problem of remembering. It's not a problem of memorizing. It's a problem when we pass off whatever we patch together and say, yes, here you go, Creator, accept this. And that's how, oh, yeah, I get to check that off. Yeah, I did that this year. And not being honest to say, okay, this is what it says. We're not able to do X, Y, and Z. And as Ima said, I believe as Sister Malaka said, and it's repeated in this conversation, the humility to say there is confusion in this area. Why is there confusion in this area? Creator, can you help us? Because this is a communal feast. It's not what I'm doing or you're doing. This is a feast as it is prescribed. And I said to Sister Mayana, the best way I could picture it for the listening audience is for those who's from New York, and I don't advocate Eastern Parkway Carnival, but it's the best way that I can, or Mardi Gras. But the picture of these events are that they are the event that takes place in a centralized location, prescribed by whoever made it up. Okay, when Labor Day comes, there is no other place that can say they had Labor Day parade except for, but they can't claim Brooklyn Labor Day parade unless it was on Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. You cannot claim Louisiana Mardi Gras, and I don't, the whole lot of debauchery. But my point is the people who are participating in this event are not confused where this thing is supposed to take place. And when you look at it, if those who are maybe in that area or in another life experienced it, people will prepare, they will save, they will travel to make sure that they have the experience. And Pesach, Feast of Unleavened Bread, the 3 times a year that we're supposed to appear before the Creator, is that experience, but it's on the flip side, which means it's a holy experience. They're doing it for, all different type of reasons. And so if you've never seen it, then, maybe you can't put your finger on it and really understand what it looks like. And my thing is, if people can do that, if we in another life could have done that for the ego, for the self, how much more can we look forward to something of this magnitude for the Creator, is my point. You understand? And so, again, I will reiterate for those who are listening, again, as everyone said, the other conversations about the New Testament Messiah, how you view, that's like conversations for another day, right? But can we leave this conversation saying, for those who are saying, I am doing the Pesach, the big I, and the no us, the no we, the big I am doing the Pesach, and we have decided the location. We've decided what we're going to do. It says unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and we decide we don't really like bitter herbs, and we're going to put some applesauce on the plate, and, then what is that? We're going to put a little egg and a lamb. What's that? We have to be honest. We have to say, you know what? We interject, and we add it to the conversation. And then from there, we can have an honest conversation. But until we get to the point to say, this is what I have done, this is what I've been taught, and this is what I'm willing to do or not willing to do, then we're kind of going to, just go around in circles. So with that, I'll relinquish the mic.
Excellent, excellent. So what we want to do at this time, it's 10:47. We're coming slowly around the bend to the 11 o'clock hour. You do have some time to call in if there's still callers that haven't pressed 1 or are listening on the blog talk but would like to call in. That number is 319-527-6239. If we don't hear from anyone, we'll start to wind down and close out the conversation. But yes, this idea of how the New Testament Messiah does or does not weigh in or participate or play a part in the Pesach observation is a conversation that definitely should be explored. Probably, and if I'm correct, has been explored on this very platform of Debate Talk for You. It's also what has been repeated, and I don't want the audience to walk away confused, is that even though there are some people on the panel that are firmly stating that there is no obedience happening when there are these convocations or gatherings under the auspice or the idea of Pesach. This is not true Pesach. Instead, it's only a memorial. We are not saying that having a memorial is a bad thing. If you are gathering in your spaces and you understand that this is a memorial and you're being honest about this is not an obedience to the law, then there are those on the panel that are saying that's understandable. And there are others on the platform that are saying that the attempt at keeping Passover. The Most High knows your heart, and that there is room to attach intention to obedience, using all of the possible resources that we have, and that is true obedience because every attempt is being made. And so these opinions reflect the community. This reflects the divide, and we're parsing through how we're all coming to some of these conclusions. And our callers, just to give you, we're basically kind of wrapping up, our callers introduced this idea that some Christian traditions and even Messianic traditions assert that the New Testament Messiah has a huge part to play in our contemporary understanding of Pesach after the original practices and instructions of obedience, that the New Testament Messiah does influence or has some influence. And so we've been exploring all of the ways that Pesach has been imagined or reimagined, produced, presented, or represented in our contemporary communities due to our our various understandings and research. So right now we don't have any callers, and the lines are still open. So unless there's anybody else that wants to introduce a new thought, we can go around and have our closing reflections on the do's and the don'ts of Pesach. Also, one of the things we've been concentrating on Pesach a lot, but there is that second part of the Chag Hamatzot and the feast of, or better known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a separate event. But Pesach is the part that usually the slaughtering of the lamb and the like that gets a lot of the contention and the need for justification. Does anybody want to kind of explore the Feast of Unleavened Bread portion of this event? Is that easier? Is that an easier kind of go-to? Are we keeping that better than we're doing Pesach? What we don't want to do is combine them. This is not a hybrid, hyphenated event. We've kind of hyphenated Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread when they are different events that simply follow one another. And for their own reasons. There are unique reasons for the Feast of Unleavened Bread that differ from the Pesach experience. And so if you want to touch briefly on that difference, or whether or not it's easier or are we more able to attend to one side of this season than the other. The floor is open.
This is Sister SHAN-T.
Okay.
I'll say this. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, it actually starts the day of Pesach, because unleavened bread is to be eaten that same night that you slay and eat the Pesach. So unleavened bread, you eat it with bitter herbs, right? So it's a 7 day thing where you purge out the leaven. Leaven represents something that will puff you up, that will have you portray an attribute of arrogance. And so, the leaven reminds us, of that. But also when the children of Israel came out of Exodus, they had to go in haste. They had to get out of Egypt in haste. So leaven is something, you put in the bread, get it to rise, you have to wait. They didn't have time to wait. They had to hurry up. So they couldn't even put the leaven in there anyway. They didn't have time to wait, so they had to go out in haste. So it's something that rises, rises, and what could represent rising, your attitude, thinking you're better than, more than, and unleavened, make sure you keep yourself humble and in humility. Yeah, Feast of Unleavened Bread is the 7 days, and 7 days is the number of completion. So I just want to say lastly that I will be definitely observing, memorializing, whatever technical terms we want to use for it. it's a story of liberation that I'd like to make sure I understand so I can pass on to descendants, and also a story that is part of the greatest love story ever. This whole Bible thing it's a great love story. It's the Father set up the goal or the end from the beginning, and that's what I understand. So, to celebrating of liberation, making sure you stay humble, making sure just because you're liberated don't mean you're better than the next person, just to keep you level-headed. Make sure that you always need the Most High. Make sure you always know that you need that spirit to connect and recharge and to get you through. So, to everybody celebrating, have a great time, enjoy yourselves, and make sure you understand not only the physical, but the spiritual aspects of it, and hope you gain more understanding as you go along. I don't condemn anybody for not understanding just now. I respect the timing of the Most High and the process that it takes to understand this word. So with that, I yield. Everybody have a good and blessed night. Thank you all who joined in. Thank you, Sister Mariana, for this topic. I appreciate it. Shalom.
Toda, yeah. Thank Toda so much for your contribution to the conversation and giving us some clarity about how Pesach and the Feast of Unleavened Bread can be understood both from the literal and historical aspect, as well as this other layering of its spiritual meanings. Thank you so much for that. Sister SHAN-T, Sister Malaka, would you like to add anything to that at this time, or should we come back to you?
I'm going to go ahead and just make a closing statement, and I'll be real quick. My prayer at the beginning of our show tonight was that any who were listening who were confused would walk away with some direction. And that is still my hope. That's still my prayer. We presented a lot of information from different sides, from different perspectives, from different even beliefs. And one could say that could lead to confusion, but I think that what it could do was it could lead you into deeper study and into coming to a determination for yourself in terms of what you believe Yah is showing you in the scripture. And it's always good to weigh your thoughts out with others who are on the same path as you, who are seeking to please the Most High, who are seeking to understand the Torah. So, one of the things I had to give up when I came into this space was I had to give up that need to have a perfect formula immediately accessible. So, when you're taught doctrine, you're taught a perfect way to respond to the situation with a perfect formula and answer, but it's doctrine. And so what I'm learning now is not doctrine. I'm learning to it's a little messy sometimes. But I think we're going to get there. I have faith that we're going to get there, that Yah is not going to leave us in a place where we don't have answers and we don't have the prescribed way. He's calling us back to the ancient path, so there must be a way for us to find the path if he's calling us back to them. I wanted to say that to those who are listening who are new in this faith. Take what you've heard tonight and use it for direction. In closing, I want to say that I encourage you to not make the decision to disregard. Don't make the decision to disregard the memorializing, or if you want to call it observation. But you must do something because it's worthy of being remembered. The story is worthy of being retold. It is, like Sister SHAN-T said, a great love story. Yah and his love for his people, how he brought his people out of a small place, a small, narrow place, into a place, a wide place where they could put their feet and where they could become a nation. And so if he did it for us then, he will do it for us again. And so the memorializing of this event keeps our faith alive. It keeps our focus on him. It keeps our eyes looking towards his deliverance. And so it is a necessary component to our faith. These feast days are a retelling of his love for us and his dealings with us and how he is not done with dealing with us. So I encourage you to do something towards pleasing him. Whatever you feel he is calling you to do based on your scriptural study, your prayer, and your interaction with other believers. He will lead you. So I wanted to basically say that. I don't have all the answers. I'm on this path just like you are. I'm unlearning some things, and I'm learning some things. And one of the things that Sister Muna said, I think Imam Naomi said this as well, is that, this walk requires humility. It really does. And with that, I'll say I love you all. All praises to the Most High, the God of our fathers, the patriarchs, and shalom to everybody on the panel and everybody that's listening.
Shalom, Rakha. Shalom, shalom. I think I'm so pleased with the way the conversation is going. I love what Sister Malaka said about not being discouraged. We're listening to a lot of vantage points and we're hearing some disagreement, but it's true that every conversation is an opportunity for introspection and further study. So don't be discouraged if you hear dissenting opinions or you hear that we're parsing through the text and trying to come to an understanding, because all of the conversations, at least on this segment, at least on this platform, under the palm, the relationship challenge, Man Up, the purpose is not to debate and discourage, but to come to an understanding and agree, as Imam Naomi said, an agreement, so that we understand one another. And this is all coming from a loving place. That is what community is about. This is what it means. We've taken the ego out and we are returning the objective to returning to the Most High. We're not trying to return to comfort. We're trying to return to being pleasing to the Most High. I have received many messages on the sideline that, my own family members, including my adopted daughters, are listening in. So I'm very, very pleased that so many people are listening and investing and getting this right. And learning from these conversations, and are not being totally discouraged and put off by, we don't all have all of the answers, and we're still just kind of figuring some of these things out. I'm going to turn it over to Imuna and Imam Naomi. Imam Naomi, also I wanted to hear your thoughts about the blood and the blood being the wine, because I know we had this conversation in another space about whether or not wine is 100% acceptable in a Pesach conversation. So I would like to hear you weigh in on that before we all close out. But before I turn the floor over, this conversation about leaven and making it spiritual, there's nothing wrong with the idea of there's a spiritual exploration, a kind of a self-diagnostic moment attached to Pesach. But we don't want to mystify Pesach. We don't want to make it this abstract, completely abstract spiritual thing. That there are elements of spirituality, there are elements of likening leaven unto sin, but that's the analogy, right? We don't want the analogy to become the purpose. Mm-hmm. It's good to understand the analogy. It's great to understand the metaphors. These are important tools, devices that allows us to participate and interact with the spaces. But very real, very important conditions and contexts happened for Pesach to be something that we're memorializing it for a reason. Something very physical, something very immediate, something very critical happened. There's a moment in our history that made this Passover necessary. And I don't want us to make it so mythic that we become distant from that low point. That's the point that makes us humble. That's the point that's very, very humbling. We were in an escapable oppression that only through the Elohim are we allowed this moment to breathe, this rebirthing, as Sister Malaka describes it, through the blood and the water. But this is a very physical, very real Exodus moment. It's not a 2018 moment. It's not a 70 AD, 70 CE moment. I don't deal with AD, CE moment because I'm an anthropologist. I don't deal with that. But so it's not that time period. It's not that. It's about that Exodus moment. That's what it's about. What it becomes later through time and through experience should be acknowledged, but we do need to remember that there's this Exodus moment that we are beholden to. Imana Ami, Sister Amuna, you can feel free to disagree with me and add your own in thoughts. We're coming now on the 11 o'clock hour, and so please, we're after the 11 o'clock hour, so the floor is yours.
Okay, Amuna, do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
Hey, Ima, I leave you for the closing remarks. I'll just say quickly, all praise to the Most High, the Holy One of Creation.
Amen.
Giving thanks and praise for this day and this opportunity to have this conversation. We can have dissenting views. We can disagree. We can be each on their journey and stop and interchange and exchange with one another without defacing one another. So hopefully for the listening audience, this is an example of how we converse. I like to say that conversation is a part of economy, and part of the reason why we as a people are not only spiritually poor, but oftentimes as a community physically poor, because one of our key ways in which we exchange is with our words. We're broken in those spaces, and we feel that we have to face one another, tear down one another in order to get our point across. And sometimes, the Most High adds the increase, not sometimes, all the times. You plant the seed, but the Creator adds the increase. And so whatever it is that you have to share, whatever it is the Creator put on your heart to share, you share it, and then it does what it does. You understand? And so as it relates to the topic, I want to say that I just forgot. Mayana said something, and then my mind took me somewhere totally different. And so, Mayana, remind me quickly, what did you just say, the last part of what you said? Because I wanted to...
I was talking about the wine and Pesach. Is that the part?
No.
About not making it too spiritual and keeping it in an extra moment?
Right. Torah is practical. This is why in the book of Deuteronomy you see Moshe saying, he's saying these things. It's not across the sea so that you may ask, who may go across and get it for me, or up in the heavens so that you may ask. You know what I'm saying? Amuna translation, can I get in a rocket ship and go there? It's not to the depths. Yes, there's a spiritual aspect to Torah, but the revealed things is on to man, and the hidden things is on to the Creator. And so when we do the revealed things, when we practice and make perfect the things that we've been given to do, we will begin to understand the spiritual things. And oftentimes what happens is we go for the spiritual things, which we miss the practicality of it. The practicality of it is that the Most High has given us a promise to our foreparents, and if we practically apply it, we will be blessed. The blessing is in the doing. You know what I'm saying? The blessing is in the practicing of these righteous acts. And the Creator, we can't overlook that our foreparents, and I believe Only Love was the one who said it, they had the language, they had the tribe, they had the genealogy, they had the land, and still they missed it. To where the Creator had to say, I don't want that. So, yes, we are supposed to remember, we're not supposed to cast down the things the Most High has left on record, but we also have to remember and not fall into the same pitfalls that our foreparents fell into, thinking, I did this, so now I can defraud my brother. I did this, so now I can lend to you on usury. I did this, so now I can scandal you. You good? Because I gave you the feast. You good? All right, off to do what I want to do. And this is kind of how we are trying to pacify the Creator with our efforts when the rest of the time that we are supposed to be doing, there's a lot of laws. You know what I mean? The things that the Most High is looking for the moral fiber of the nation to be intact, it's clear that it's not. Maybe individually in its different spaces, but as a collective, it is not. And if we want to be pleasing before the Most High, we must bring forth these things and begin to work on them as we have done on these platforms. Shout out to Brother Sal, Showtime, as we're showing and proving can be done. So with that, once again, all praise be to the Most High, the Holy One of Creation, and I pray everybody have a blessed night. Iman Naami, it's all yours.
Okay.
because I want Imam Naomi to give her final thoughts and pray us out. So before she speaks, I just want to give a reminder and a shout-out to the Anonymous Hebrew, the brother B.A., and Sal Showtime for speaking out on behalf of the sisters, having the show about the righteous women who have been distanced, neglected, and unacknowledged thus far. That episode will be in our description box. Try to support the brothers. We are trying to support the brothers that are really about unity in our nation, and I wanted to just go ahead and shout them out one last time and then turn it over for Ima's last thoughts, and prayerfully she will also pray us out. May the segment be blessed. All praises to the Most High, the Holy One of creation. And then prayerfully we have had an edifying conversation. Ima Naomi, the floor is yours.
Kane, Toda Rabah Od Pa'ad. I said I was going to try to get in bed real early, but I see I can forget that, so I'm not even worried about that because it's just so interesting. Again, I would say Toda Rabah to the brothers who reached out and paid compliments to the sisters. It encourages us and keeps us going in the way of building righteous sisterhoods, I believe. Also, about the wine, it's been a tradition, and I say tradition for years, that we've had wine at Passover, or at Pesach and Chag Hamatzot, I should say. I'm not a drinker, so I don't. When I did look into the subject years and years ago about the fermentation, about it's actually the sugar that's in the grapes that ferments and blah blah blah. Some of them say they can have wine and no vinegar. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, so I'm hesitant to give a definitive answer, even based on my research. I would have to, I guess, go further into the people who actually grow the grapes to make wine. There are places all over the country or in various parts of the country where people actually grow the grapes for wine, grow certain types of grapes and whatnot. I know that I did study that much. But rather than go into this long diatribe about wine and everything like that, let me just suffice it to say that I'm not sure about that. And because I'm not a drinker, of course, I leave it out. I leave it out of my particular celebrations. I also want to thank Amuda for her wonderful insight again. I've always been impressed with this young lady ever since I've met her and the wealth of wisdom that she seems to possess even for somebody so young. I have to say that about all of the daughters that I've adopted over the last few years. I'm just amazed at their wisdom, and I'm so encouraged by that because there's been so many years that I've seen the regression of Israel that has discouraged me and made me, not discouraged me, but made me disparaged about it, that I'm so glad to see these fresh lights and these new lights and these shining lights that are among our young women, and I'm just overjoyed about that. I would say again, we do have to humble ourselves, and I do pray that we will come to some decision on memorializing these days because, as you say, here we are in the land of our captivity. We need to just call it that. We are memorializing these days. But nevertheless, making that effort to show the Most High that even though we don't have it all right, and even though there are things that we're still learning, that we're at least trying to please Him. We know that we don't have it completely correct, but I would not stop that. I would not let that stop me from trying to do a memorialization to the best of my ability. I'll put it that way. Again, I want to thank you all and thank the Most High, first of all, and then thank you all for even allowing this forum for us to be able to come together and discuss these very important issues in our community. I want to thank Brother Sal again for his graciousness in allowing this forum to exist and whatnot. And I will be visiting Sal later on another matter to help to support him in this effort because I think it's very, very worthwhile and very, very vital to our community.
Okay. If you want to donate, just to the listening audience, if you want to donate to Sal and keeping Debate Talk for You on the air, you can do that by going to your PayPal. And there's also, what is it, the Cash App, Sal? right?
That's
so you
right.
go to the PayPal, huh?
That's right. It's Cash App.
That's right. Right. So you go to the PayPal. You can use the Cash App. The email address for the PayPal is debatetalkforyou@gmail.com. And with the Cash App, I believe you can use the $ and Sal Showtime's name to contribute whatever you have on your heart to do so. I want to thank Ima for touching in on that wine question, because I remember since the 90s that I had to give up my hot sauce because of vinegar, but then there was always Manischewitz on the table. And
right.
So, I mean, I'd rather have hot sauce before Manischewitz, grape cherry, or any peach infusion. I had hot sauce. So that was a question for me. So I really wanted to hear the Ima's thoughts on that. Forgive me for weighing in.
Slika, let me just add in that you cannot, I've found out through doing some study on vinegar, you cannot produce leavening with vinegar alone. You have to add baking soda to it. Otherwise, it just fizzles like carbonated water. This is what I've learned. If anybody has anything different, if they've learned anything different, please let me know. But from what I've understood, you cannot, vinegar alone will not cause leavening. It has to be mixed with baking soda.
Wait. So does that mean I can have hot sauce again after 27 years of
according to all the studies that I've done, vinegar is just acetic acid. And it's usually the dregs of, it's usually the end product of wine or fruit. You could have, as we know about the apple cider vinegar. From what I've understood, you cannot do, vinegar alone will not leaven anything. You have to add baking soda, or you have to add a leavening agent to it.
Okay, I've been using cayenne, but if I can get some hot sauce, that's okay. Either way, it's a week without hot sauce. But
well, you know one thing, I advise you to do your own studies. You're very much into research. You can, and if I'm wrong, please come back to me before Friday and let me know, because I'm not getting rid of my vinegar. From what I understand, it's okay. But if it's not okay, I can leave it out for 7 days. It's no big deal.
Right. I agree with you.
That's another thing I'd like to say, too. This is only 7 days. We get all bent out of shape. We go over backwards. We get into big debates and everything. It's only 7 days. There's so many things that we can do without for 7 days. If there's a question about it, if we're not sure about it, just simply leave it out for the 7 days. After the 7th day or the 8th day, go pick up whatever it is that was controversial, that we can eat, and go ahead on with your business. I mean, it's not a big deal.
I agree. I'm with you, Ima. Okay, so that's. I apologize for breaking in while you were speaking.
That's quite all right. You have to do that with me, because otherwise I'll be here all night.
Apparently, you have to do that with me too. Otherwise, I'll keep you all night. Well, go ahead. Go ahead and close that, Ima.
Okay. Please forgive my dragon voice. This is the nighttime voice now. But anyway.
we got Under the Palm After Dark. Go ahead.
Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam. Elohei Avatenu Avraham Yitzchak veYisrael. Once again, Yahweh, we come before thee to thank thee for this forum in which we can come and discuss the matters of law, statutes, and commandments that thou hast left on record, to get a clarity and more understanding about it, so that we may serve thee even better, O Yah. We know that we are not serving thee in the ways that you have prescribed exactly, because we are not in our land. We are still in the land of our oppressors. But we ask, O Yah, that you would look upon our efforts, even the efforts that we are putting forth to please thee, even in these places, O Yah, and let them be acceptable in thy sight. We ask that you would bless each and every person on this line and all the families that they represent, and even those who are not on this line, but all of our people who are scattered throughout the length and breadth of this earth, who are Israel, and even those who would even adhere to our way, O Yah. We ask that you would bless all the people, and that you would keep us safe and healthy and happy and full of understanding and full of determination and zealousness to serve thee and thee alone. We ask, O Yah, that you would bless all the sick, the shut-in, those who are suffering of one thing or another, those who are incarcerated in the prison houses, those who are facing homelessness or who are homeless, those who are struggling under many, many worries. We ask, O Yah, that you would be with them and give them peace. We ask again, O Yah, your blessings in all things and everything. I ask that you would continue your mercy, your compassion, and your loving kindness to us and all Yisrael, wherever they may be. Again, O Yah, we thank thee for all things and for everything, knowing full well that our words are not enough to thank thee fully, but asking that you might find not only our words, but more importantly, our deeds, that they are acceptable before thee in thy sight. To that, O Yah, we say, there is no other Elohim but thee, and all praise, honor, glory, exaltation belongeth unto thee and thee alone. Therefore we turn to this say, Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, Elohei Avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak ve'Yisrael, mehadir, 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 Baruch atah tamid ve'tamid. Hallelujah. Amen.
Yeah. Hallelujah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I know that we had a caller, and I didn't find out about it until later. So, caller, my apologies for not getting you on the air, but if you would like to leave your question or comment in the comment section, we'll be up on YouTube in a couple of hours. We will answer you there. My apologies for not getting you on the air. Have a good night, everyone. Shalom.